Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські Ті танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 232 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and even as Ukraine is continuously bombarded by Russian missile attacks and strikes, the citizens of Ukraine and the military of Ukraine say that they will never fall to PUTLER's tyranny, and they continue to fight to clear the skies of Russian missiles and also to keep this war going. And that's what we're going to be covering in this next news segment right here. And so starting off, we're going to be going into Russia real quick, because after the Kerch bridge disaster, and of course the Russians trying to make it sound like it was a terror attack, now for some reason the Russians are finding even more terrorists, or what they're calling terrorists, than they ever have in the whole war. In fact, up till this point, the Russians have never said that there were Ukrainian, I guess you could say, operatives, spies, or agents inside of Russia, but now in Bryansk, they found one. Out of all times, right after the Kerch Bridge disaster, and the Russian public is now terrified of Ukrainians doing things inside of Russia. And so here's a video of them, quote-unquote, detaining a Ukrainian spy. Also, I like how they have this massive convoy of blacked out vehicles, Matthew, and this single guy at a bus stop, and it's just totally normal in Russia, I guess. You know, I guess Russian people believe this stuff, but this already looks wrong, and also it's funny to see that the camera is already rolling to catch all of the action with a whole, like, 4-car convoy in front of him. When you see him hop out, tase the guy. Wait a minute, hang on, let's watch that again.
Wait, they tased him right off the bat?
Let's see, he pops out. Did he really tase? Okay, yeah, we can now see the strings. So they did tase the guy right off the bat, just ran out and tased him. Now we can see them pulling out some kind of thing out of a backpack that's wrapped in sarin wrap. Wait a minute, hang on. I don't understand this. This is the same guy from the bus stop. So they cuffed him and then walked him into the woods? Uh-oh, that's not really a great setup. If y'all know anything about police, usually when you get arrested, they don't march you off into the forest. They usually take you to a police station. So this is an interesting look for Russian propaganda. Also, one other thing. Nope, that's an AK-12. I was about to say, is that an M4? But nope, it's an AK-12. Also, the Russian police, or whoever these guys are better equipped than any Russian soldier we've seen on the front line for like the past 3 months. So when you wonder, where did all of the Russian equipment go? Apparently it's going towards suppressing the Russian citizens and not going towards winning the war. When we see him unwrap this box covered in sarin wrap, and now they're unpacking this large sushi roll. Although this bus stop was clearly in the middle of nowhere, now we can hear the sounds of city buses just a little ways away. And now he opens the pack, and we can see that this man has brought a green thermos with him. And I'm just kidding, it's supposed to be some kind of a, y'all know what it is. I don't know if YouTube will start going, oh, if I say the word, but apparently they're now cracking down on Ukrainian terrorists because they've gone unmolested for far too long. And now that the Kerch Bridge has been taken out, now they're really going to start paying attention to them. What is this really? This is just the Russians trying to save face with their public by having this atrocity happen on the Kerch Bridge, at least militarily for them, with almost half the thing being knocked out. And so now they're going to sit there and they're going to stage videos like this one to make it look like, oh, we got the situation under control. But if they had it under control, then why did the Kerch Bridge happen? And of course, the Russians won't ever be able to answer that question. And they're just trying to quickly make the public feel, at least the very worried and fearful public now, make them think, oh, the Russian government has everything under control still. Although we know they really don't. With that, we're now going to be moving all the way up to Moscow. And I've got some crazy videos to show y'all today. First off, I'm going to show y'all this squirrely looking little man that has a head full of hair. And you wouldn't believe it, but this is the Russian propagandist that we've made fun of on this channel for about the past 6 to 7 months. I'm saying this correctly. This video is from 2008, I believe, if I check this caption again. 2008. And what he's about to say is incredibly interesting. I'm going to let him speak for himself. So here's the video.
Я вам так скажу, никакой войны России с Украиной никогда не будет, потому что любой человек, который на полном серьезе попытается осуществить такого рода акт, является преступником, притом я не могу себе представить, какого размера. В Украине живут братские нам абсолютно по духу, по крови, по общей истории люди, война с которыми является самым страшным преступлением, которое себе может только придумать. Не надо кричать «Севастополь наш», не надо кричать «Крым наш», надо просто сделать так, чтобы жизнь в нашей стране была настолько привлекательной, чтобы украинам, белорусам, молдаванам, армянам, грузинам всем захотелось жить с нами в мире и идти к нам.
Huh. Where is this guy now? Where is this guy? And where is this mindset that the propagandist used to have? Isn't that interesting? He just said exactly everything that's happened today would never happen, and if it did, it would be a criminal act by the Russians to do. And now in 2022, that exact man is saying that what the Russians are doing is completely justified and it's perfectly okay. And you want to know why? It's because over the past, I guess you could say past 12 years, past 14 years, this guy has slowly been corralled in by Putin and the state government to say exactly what they want him to say. And you can actually see that at this moment, considering that, I guess you could say the super crazy, I guess you could say almost fascist Russian ideologies hadn't really taken over Russia yet, people were allowed to say this kind of stuff. But now we can see that this guy says the complete opposite. And it's very interesting to see that deep down, under all of that psycho crap that he does on TV nowadays, he may actually think that, but he's so spineless, he just won't stick with it. He's just going to say whatever people tell him to say. And that also that adds a whole nother layer to this guy. It adds a whole bunch of lore to the psycho Russian propagandist guy. But still, probably the most insane thing to see here is that he actually had hair. Like, the same face and everything. It looks like he hasn't aged at all over the past 14 years, but he has a head of hair. So, also, I saw the B93 said money changed him. I would say money probably did change him. They probably offered him loads of cash to be on state TV and say whatever they tell him to say. And so for that, he started to say whatever they wanted him to.
I wonder if he actually believes the stuff he says, though, because he's obviously getting paid to say it, but he seems like pretty convicted in what he's saying.
But then again, a lot of people aren't convicted in what they say, and a lot of people do it for the sole benefit of making $1, you know, and that's something actually, that's a good point to bring up, Matthew, because remember a certain news anchor on a certain channel that was the brother of a governor, and he got removed from that news channel and he went to another one, and his well, not speaking about politics, but this specific person's political ideologies flipped on a dime depending on who was paying him. And he does the entire, and y'all know who I'm talking about. We're not going to get into American politics or anything here, but this is to prove the point. If someone pays you enough, you will make people believe that you believe in what you're talking about. This guy does the exact same routine on both channels from what I know. It's the same kind of like pouting, crying, this is what they're doing to you and they're trying to kill you kind of spill that he did on one channel, and he went over to the other. He's doing the exact same thing there. And so I think that this guy probably falls in that category. Right now, he's being paid by the Russian state TV. And so he's going to cry and do this whole sham and flim-flam thing so that way he gets paid. But if the government flipped tomorrow and there was a coup and someone was in charge that wasn't Putin, if they were paying his paycheck, he would immediately start singing their song and charging on and leading ahead saying, we ought to do this, we ought to do that. I support the new government all the way. That's probably what this guy is. And you can see that when he was actually allowed a little bit of room to speak back in 2008, you can actually see that he was clearly against the war. But moving on to the present day, Russian media isn't as sensible as the propagandist was about 12 or 14 years ago. Nowadays, we can see Russian propagandists saying some incredibly sick things that we only saw back in the 40s during another dark time in history, in German history. So, real quick, we're going to play this video, and I'm going to let y'all see what the Russian state TV is saying on some channels now. And so with that, here's the video.
Неоднократно, а постоянно, от 2 до 5 недель, для того, чтобы полностью вывести всю инфраструктуру, все ТЭЦ, ТЭС, ГРЭС, все тяговые подстанции, все линии электропередач, все железнодорожные узлы. Вот тогда Украина опустится в холод, в темноту, тогда не смогут подвозить ни боекомплекта, ни топлива. И тогда украинская армия превратится в толпу вооруженных людей с кусками железа. Это нужно делать постоянно, неоднократно. Сейчас Зеленский может воспользоваться вот этим событием только для того, чтобы дополнительно затребовать еще денег и еще вооружений. Поэтому нужно долбить постоянно.
You know, I don't understand what it is with the Russians and the Russian state TV and their constant demand for bloodshed of citizens and also just plunging the citizenry into absolute hell. They do that constantly, and you can see here that they just keep on ramping up that talk. And over this war, the Russian mindset's gone from we're going to liberate the Ukrainians from their Nazi oppressors to now we do not like the Ukrainians, according to them, and we want them all to just suffer. That's what they've turned into completely, and that shows you their true mindset. And historically, that's always been their mindset. And so I don't know why people are surprised whenever they hear this kind of stuff, and I always show this every once in a while, just to remind everyone what the Russian state TV, what the Russian army is most likely doing, and what generally all of the supporters of the war in Russia are on in terms of page. They're all on this exact same page for the most part. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of Russia and on into Belarus, because we've seen something incredibly interesting. It was a little bit of film taken outside of Minsk today on a railroad heading east into Russia, and we saw that the Belarusians are apparently supplying the Russians with arms. The Russian situation has gotten so desperate, they're now pulling out military arms from puppet states like Belarus to help them to try and keep the war going. And so here's the clip of all of these T-72s. Also, I gotta mute that, but all of these Belarusian T-72s on their way to Russia, along with a bunch of Ural 4320s, most likely to try and help the failing supply situation. Now, this tells us a lot. This one video tells us the Russian armed forces are collapsing, and the Belarusians most likely will not enter this war. Reason being, the Belarusians don't really have a military, and if they're sending over this kind of equipment in numbers, and we've had a general idea that they've been doing this for some while, about a few months, 2 to 3 months. The first time we ever saw video footage of a Belarusian vehicle being used by the Russians was about that time ago. We can tell that the Russians are suffering, and the Belarusians probably don't even have a military to stand with now. So, Belarusian army, we'll pull them up real quick. The armed forces of Belarus, well, that doesn't look Soviet at all. And that doesn't look Soviet at all either. But we'll digress for the moment. We'll just scroll down, and let's take a look at the size of their army. 62,000 men. And the deployed personnel is around 4,500. So you can kind of tell by the size of that army that whatever they'd be able to actually muster against the Ukrainians to try and attack them would be incredibly small. In fact, it would really be non-existent. They would almost just be absorbed into the Russian army as, I guess you could say, a contingent fighting force. But moving on down, let's see if we can get an equipment list. List of equipment of the armed forces of Belarus. Also, that is a reassuring sign that the Belarusian army is poorly equipped when you put a 23mm autocannon on top of a BMD. That's not a great sign.
That looks so cheap and messed up.
It does. And you know what's really cheap to me is that a machine gunner from a distance can take this entire gun's armament out by just aiming for the autocannon and firing at it for a little bit. That guy would get hit, obviously.
Somebody that asked yesterday, can you like modify a ripsaw and put some like gun on top of it, and here you go.
Yeah, if you leave it to the Russians, they're going to come up with some jank stuff. Also the Belarusians as well. But let's go to their equipment real quick. Oh, they got an MP5. Ooh, that's scary. What are those things, like outdated at this point? I think everyone uses MP9s or MP7s at this point. But then again, I could be wrong. I think the SAS may still use them. But moving further on down, Benelli M4. I got respect for the Benelli M4. The Benelli M4 is actually a pretty decent shotgun. I have one similar to it. It's a Weatherby SA459. I used to use it a long time ago. I haven't used it in like years, but I used to use it to shoot clays, and that was pretty fun. But anyways, moving on from that. Got your standard Russian stuff. You got some AK-40, like legit AK-47s, not the AKMs, but the actual AK-47s. Garbage. The AKMs, you know, they do what they do. AK-74s, you know, everyone's using those. The 9A91, that one looks just messed up, like someone just started scraping this thing along gravel, but I don't really know a lot about that one.
That silencer is longer than the actual gun itself.
Yeah, I wonder how much weight that silencer adds to the gun. I bet it makes it front heavy. But moving on down, Apparently, they got an anti-material sniper, so pretty much like a Beretta M82. Moving further on down, they got, normal Russian stuff. Let's get to their tanks, and let's see if we get any numbers. Ah, yes. The T-72s. They have 862 of them. Do y'all really believe that? I don't really believe that. 862 of them in operation is highly unlikely, and then they only have 72 T-80s. So their tank force is already incredibly small. In fact, it's way smaller than the Ukrainian armed forces tank numbers were at the beginning of the war. And so for that reason, I would have to say, let's see here, 100 acquired at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, at least 24 upgraded to the B3 variant. Oh my god! Wait a minute, okay, so all of these T-72s are the T-72B or the T-72A. They don't even have the modern T-72B3 variant of the tank. All of them are literal Cold War era in terms of their technology. So even if they did have 862 of these, practically worthless, because that's about the best they'll get right here with this T-72B. So I'm not putting a lot of faith into Belarusian armor or equipment, but going with that number, and assuming that the Belarusians probably sent loads of these to Russia, probably around 100 to 200 of them, their tank force has been cut in it by a quarter in size. I don't even think they could launch a reasonable, I guess you could say, new front into Ukraine without massive amounts of support from the Russian military, and the Russian military is in such bad straits at this point, they wouldn't be able to do that. And so once again, just to address this real quick, I've seen that it's been making its rounds in the mainstream media again, that the Belarusians will be joining the war within days. I know that a lot of my long-term veterans of this channel have been around long enough to hear me address this about 6 times at this point, and each time the Belarusians never joined the war, and I don't think they'll join it this time. So if I end up being wrong, I'll eat my foot on that. But I'm pretty,
Eat your foot?
Yeah, I'll eat my shoe or eat my foot or whatever the saying is. Probably not my foot. That wouldn't really be healthy, and also I wouldn't be able to walk much anymore. But I don't think that the Belarusians will join the war again. This is about the 6th time I've heard it. It's never happened before. I don't think it'll happen ever. But anyways, we can see. Oh my God, it gets worse. Oh, they got the rip-off Humvees.
Good old dong thing.
Yeah, they got 50 of these things apparently. And also, they got a homemade armored car. It's just
What's wrong with that?
That's just an upgraded BRDM without the turret. They just smacked on some bulletproof windshields to it, and that was it.
They even have a little canvas on the side.
Yeah, they do. Ew. Yeah, that's horrendous. It's like World War II era. Let's go down to something else real quick. Let's check out real quick the rest of their forces. So not a lot of artillery to speak of. They don't have really that big of an artillery force at all. They have 18 Mista S's. That's it. They have a small amount of towed artillery pieces. They have 30 Tunguskas, 24 Osas, or 24 batteries of Osas, 350 Strela 10s. Not a lot of AA. Not a lot of that at all. Let's go real quick and look at their Air Force, because I wonder if their Air Force is sizable at all. So, wait, that was the list of equipment of the armed forces of Belarus right there. Was that all of it? Did we pass the planes? No, we didn't. Where are the planes? Well, hang on, let me Belarusian Air Force. Okay, so here we go. Belarusian Air Force. Scrolling down. What are these? Ew, they got L-39 Albatrosses at a military parade. That tells you a lot about the state of their Air Force. Let's see, let's scrolling down. Okay, so they got 67 Su-25s and 34 MiG-29s. That's it. In terms of combat aircraft, that's all they got. They don't even have any, I guess you could say, public numbers on how many Su-24s they have, or Su-30s. They only got 4 of those, and 8 of them are on order, and I don't think those orders will be fulfilled due to the, I guess you could say, supply line problems that the Russians are having. So, all in all, yeah, they won't be able to invade Ukraine. I think that's just nothing more than the news trying to get people to watch it for a bit and make them feel like things are about to get worse. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of Belarus, and we're also going to be moving down towards the Kerch Bridge, because we're trying to hit everything happening in Russia today first. In the Kerch Bridge area, as y'all know, the bridge has been hit, and a viewer the other day wanted to tell me, get your facts straight, the bridge isn't damaged, it's still operational. Well, if that was the case, Tell me why the Russian government is saying that it'll take 3 to 4 days for you to be in this line to hop on a ferry. And just look at all of these trucks in Crimea waiting to board a ferry because the bridge is out. Oh my god. It goes on forever. Are those potatoes? Just a truck full of potatoes. Just sacks of potatoes.
I thought they were oranges for a minute.
No, I think that's like the red net around them, but it looks like it's either onions or potatoes. But they just left the whole wide back of the truck open. I guess they're eating out of it since they'll be here for 3 to 4 days. Good God, that's insane.
This dude needs to get a windsock.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Matthew. That kind of looks like an airfield, doesn't it? Like it looks
does.
Like...
It really does.
Let's look around and see if we can find a runway around here. We can find a massive old pit that they used to mine out of. It looks like they might not be mining out of it anymore. Let's see, airfield around Kerch. That looks like an airfield that was stripped up and then they just grew a tree line on top of it. Wait a minute. Nope, that's not it. Trying to see if we can find this place because that was really weird. Wait a minute. Hang on, this might be it. Let's see if we can find that little road. Nah, I don't think we can. Actually, that looks like a failed road project. Like they're going to build a road through there and then they just stopped and never finished it. Interesting. Jinx. But sadly, I cannot find this little airstrip-looking road that they're on. But still, 3 to 4 days to cross the Kerch Bridge. And imagine the buildup of vehicles that may be on the other side that are still trying to ship supplies into Crimea. The Kerch Bridge being knocked out even partially with one lane running and the railroad most likely being repaired in the next several days has caused massive logistical issues for the Russians in Crimea, even for the civilians. And so imagine how difficult it probably is for the military. Oh, man, I mean, it's something that can't even be measured right now. We'll have to wait until the end of the war when we can hopefully get some kind of official figures and statistics on that. Because I have a feeling that the Russian supply chain in this area is going to be backed up, most likely in the end, by 2 whole weeks at its peak. And the Russians will probably be deficient on supplies of gas in Crimea, food, clothing, ammunition, and supplies for the front lines, everything. And so I have to say, looking back at this map, I'm glad I didn't change the colors of these rail networks, and I guess you could say supply lines, to green, because they're certainly not going to be operational with a massive convoy like this, just waiting to get to the other side of the Kerch Strait. And so with that, and that's the end of this little segment of news inside of Russia, and we're now about to start moving into Ukraine itself and start covering all of the news we've gotten from there. And there's been actually a massive amount today. But before we get there, we're going to answer a couple of polls and also read off a couple of questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, and it is that time of the night for the first question segment, and we have 2 polls to address. The first poll said, how fake is this video? And this refers to the first video that we showed tonight of, well, I won't say that. I'm not sure if YouTube's going to come get us for saying that. But it looks like 9% said it's real, 37% said it's fake, and 54% said it's obscenely fake. So I would have to fall within obscenely fake because it doesn't look real at all to me. But that's just my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you on that poll?
It doesn't look real to me at all. It's obscenely fake for sure. Because when you look at it, what type of sense would it have made to take the guy, tase him, and then bring him into the woods away from the bus station to open up the thing there? Why in the world have everyone standing around it too? Because if it was, the thing we think, and it blew up, it would get everyone, including the cameraman and about the 5 cops and the guy who's standing there. So why in the world would they do that? Wouldn't they take a bomb squad to open that thing up and look at it? No, that's why it's fake. The whole thing was fake from start to finish. Nothing they did made sense, and it was all set up for the cameras. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the second poll said, do you think this Russian propagandist spews propaganda because of which reason? It looks like 49% said a mixture of above, 13% said he is scared for his life, 29% said he is getting paid good money, and 9% said he believes the propaganda. Now for me, I would have to say it's a mixture of all the three options. Clearly, I think that there's some level of him believing the propaganda because he's, in my opinion, too convicted when he says it, or either he's a really good actor, one or the other. And also, he's probably getting paid good money, or at least I think, what in Russia, what's considered good money. But also, scared for his life, probably so. I'm not sure if he's free to quit or not. Probably not, because that would look bad for the Russian government. But Enforcer, that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I would have to say, I honestly would have to disagree with the majority. I'd have to go with the 29% that said he's getting paid good money. Because if you look at U.S. journalism in the mainstream news networks, you can notice some things that don't really make a lot of sense. And also people who will flip sides depending on who's paying them on a dime. And I, of course, tried to bring up an instance of it earlier. It looks like some people knew who I was talking about. Some people didn't. Do you think that, I'm trying to think, Matthew, would that be okay to say the person's name aloud?
YouTube wouldn't get us, but I'm not sure if the audience would think it's political or not.
All right, so just saying this from an unbiased standpoint, okay? No politics involved, just looking at it for face value of what it is. Chris Cuomo used to work on the network CNN, and while he was on CNN, you know, of course, you know that Fox speaks about one political side, CNN speaks about the entirely opposite political side. And while Cuomo was on CNN, he talked completely their side. He made this whole crying show and trick, and you know, all of it was to push what the program wanted, and you know, he got paid to do that. Then he got fired. Well, I forgot. What, did he resign or was he fired, Matthew?
I think he was sacked, but he did the kind of like resign before you get sacked kind of routine.
Yeah, so he kind of did the resign/sacking, and so another news network that's associated with Fox hired him on, and now he's completely flipped his political ideology, and he's speaking that side because they're paying him. And so going off of this one instance and model here in the United States, I think that guy says whatever anyone's paying him to do. Also, no, I just saw Rudy say politics are fair game on here. No, they are not. They are not fair game. We're talking about this from an unbiased perspective, because if that had happened in the opposite direction, it's still a fair example of what I'm trying to prove here. But we do not get into politics of any sort on this channel. So anyways, moving back onto this. Going off of that instance right there, and knowing that probably every single news reporter in the U.S., and I can tell you all this, if anyone from CNN or Fox or any news network was fired and they were given a job at another opposite news organization, it doesn't really matter who it is. I could see a lot of them flipping sides on a dime, and a lot of people don't realize that these people say what they're saying because they're paid and they're told to say it, and they really don't care. So they just go up there on TV and they say this stuff. They don't really believe in it. But moving back to this guy, I think he's in the same category. The Russian government started paying him. They're telling him to say a thing. He gets paid regardless of what he says. Well, not regardless of what he says. He gets paid depending on what he says, and so for that reason alone, he is going to be saying whatever the Russian government wants. So I think it's entirely up to money, not because he believes it, not because he's afraid of them. He's just saying, they pay my check, they want me to say this, and I'll say that for him as long as I get paid. So with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, and also, I am like, honestly, I really want to dig in, you know, because we're talking about the news organizations a little bit in the U.S. I really want to dig into how much it's just a sham and it's just full of crap, but we don't want to get on that here, you know, because one, I think some people may like some of these news anchors and such out there, but you know, there's like, Matthew, you know the one I'm talking about. We were watching last night. I was like, you know, notice what's on his suit, but then he says this, you know, like, there's a lot.
It's kind of a bad sign when you see a news anchor wearing a CIA pin. That's not a good sign.
It's not that great of a sign at all, and it's also interesting when they're always talking about, and that's probably getting a little bit too much into it, but it's always interesting to see that someone says one thing but something on them shows completely different, that's always not that great. But anyways, we are going to be moving on to the next poll if we have one, or the questions.
All right, so that was our last poll for this segment, but there are many more to come, so stand by for that. But up first from the Super Chats, we have a $165 donation from Mark, who has changed his name to Mark Slava Ukraine, which I think is the translation, hopefully. He says, apparently they are starting up the Russian T-62 tank factory because it's so simple it does not need Western tech. The engine is a derivative of the T-34, which is an American design.
And I thank you so much for the support. And also, it is pretty interesting to hear that. And I'll have to try and pull up some news and look into that a little bit. But to be honest, I wouldn't doubt it a lot. I don't feel like they'll probably start pumping out brand new T-62s, brand new hull and everything that was just cast like in this month. They're most likely going to be taking the T-62s out of the graveyard, and these factories are going to be used to get them up and running again. Most likely. But then again, it is hilarious to think. Also, the T-62, just in case you all don't know, is that mechanically simple. The Russians probably do have the, I guess you could say, industrial ability to probably pump out a couple of those things, or at least refurbish them where they're in running order. And so, with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. And also, the engine is a derivative of the T-34. So let's type that up. Let's take a look at this. T-34 engine. So the T-34 engine was... Wait, the T-34... Hang on. Kharkiv Model V2. What? The engine is from Kharkiv in Ukraine. The Russians are driving around tanks that have engines that are called Kharkiv.
No way.
Yeah, that's kind of...
That can't be.
Oh, man. Let's see. And they were designed at the Kharkiv Locomotive Factory. But anyways, moving on from that, let's check out the engine of the T-62. Engine of T-62. It's a V55 12-cylinder, not 25-cylinder, 4-stroke, 1-chamber, 38-liter, such and such. So let's see if we can get the actual name of this thing. The V55 engine. So V55 engine. So let's see here. The V55 diesel tank engine. Hang on. All right, so that is about the normal condition of a Russian tank right there. That's a really good depiction of one. Sadly, I cannot find a picture of this exact engine, but I honestly would not doubt it. If you all know anything historically about the Russians actually imported some Italian Fiats, and that's where the famous Lada came from. Because if you pull it up, the Lada, and then the... Wait a minute, hang on. Lada Forbidden. I didn't pull up the Lada website. Lada car.
A whole lot of car.
That's a whole lot of car. You can see here, this Lada. Right here. That's a picture from Soviet times. And if we pull up a Fiat, let's see, which Fiat was it? Fiat Lada. Let me just type that in. You will see the Fiat 124. And if you look at a picture of a Fiat 124, and a Lada side by side, it's literally the exact same car. The Russians bought a couple of these from the Italians, reverse engineered them, and started pumping out Ladas. So I knew
I didn't like Fiat for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not my favorite cars, but I guess they kind of worked. But anyways, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, Mark, and thank you so much once again for the massive support. It helps this channel to keep on running, and without viewers like you, these streams wouldn't be able to run nightly. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, big shout out to BC Skyman for putting in a $50 donation, but BC only left a super sticker. No comment, sadly, but BC, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
What say me? I says, thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman. It helps us out a massive deal. And you didn't leave a comment, man. But I thank you so much. I know that you've enjoyed this channel so much. You've said that a lot in the past. And I thank you for supporting it so that way we can continue to cover the news we cover every single day of the week, except for Mondays. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the final question of this segment.
All right, and the final one of this segment goes to Daniel Nilsson, who puts in a $25 donation and says, "Take one from the chat. You do a fantastic job. Thanks and greetings from Sweden."
And thank you so much for the support. And it's also cool to hear that we have Leaf Spring Army members in Sweden. I like Sweden. Sweden is a really neat country. A lot of the Scandinavian countries are really interesting. Not so much for the typical cliche thing that a lot of Americans go to, which is the Vikings and all. I honestly think they're incredibly interesting for their 1600s and onwards history, because y'all all know that I only focus on history largely from the 1600s onwards. They were really cool during that whole entire time frame, especially during the 30 Years' War, because Gustavus Adolphus was just a great general. But moving all the way on from that, still, I thank you so much for the support, and it's really cool to hear a Leaf Spring Army member from Sweden again. And so with that, we will answer a live chat sponsored in your name. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and thanks to BC Skyman, Trader Kate, here goes your question. Enforcer, is it possible that the bridge wasn't fully destroyed in order to give Russian civilians a route out of Crimea?
And I would have to say no. I think that the bridge was destroyed as efficiently as possible given the circumstances, but double hitting it would have given it away. Hitting it once and heavily damaging it made it look like it may have been a terrorist attack. And so the Russians could react and save some face by, I guess you could say, making it kind of look like that. If they had taken out, well, no, actually, I'm going to have to go back and reverse this logic, because I'm sitting here and thinking about it, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So let me go back and let me think that over again, because right now the Russians are conducting reprisal attacks against the Ukrainian populace for the destruction of this bridge, and so they're obviously blaming it on Ukraine. I don't know why the Ukrainians didn't completely destroy the bridge, but to be honest with you, I think the option you just gave is actually a fairly good answer. It may be giving some of the civilians a way out, but at the same time, we also see that there has been a massive buildup of Russians, Russian trucks and probably cars as well, for the ferry crossing that will take them to the other side of the strait. So I'm not entirely sure about that, because it's really not helping a lot of civilians get out. But at the same time, it is a pretty good suggestion. I think we'll keep that one, I guess you could say, in the running until we get some kind of official answer on this. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for sponsoring a live chat question, and I hope I was able to answer that one fairly well. Also, real quick, has anyone else noticed that there's this little fortress here? Ruined 1700s fort built by the Turks. I've seen this the whole time we've been passing this area, and that is actually kind of cool. That's really neat, actually. So there's just some old 1700s fort, kind of like you would see here in Alabama, although ours aren't made of stone, they're made of wood, that the Turks had when they held Crimea for a short while. Hell, maybe the Turks ought to get involved in the war. Like, the Russians claim that Crimea is theirs, but obviously, Crimea is Turkey's. What do you think, Matthew?
I'll be honest, Enforcer, I was busy in the live chat.
Oh, man.
So I was tuned out.
That's totally fine. I understand, but that's really interesting. Also, I love the architecture of this. It's very nice, actually, and it's actually well kept to have been through so much, considering that this specific part of Crimea has seen a lot since this fort was built. But anyways, that is really neat. I'm glad we were able to take a quick little look at that. In case you all don't know, I'm sorry. I'm a huge sucker for anything historical. So if I see like a little fortress symbol on the map, it's always just eating me. I want to go click on it and take a look at it real quick. And I'm glad we were able to take a look at that one, because that was a real treat. Or as that railroad guy on TikTok says at some point, "I'm glad I stayed up for this. This is a treat." But with that, we're going to be moving on from the question segment, and we're now going to be moving on into our next segment of news, starting off with the location unknowns in Ukraine. And we have a load of them today, a total of 10 location unknowns. Starting off, we saw that a Russian MTLB driver decided to not give 2 weeks notice that he would be resigning from his position, and he decided to terminate immediately. When you see the MTLB driving down the road, now I know you might be busy in the live chat, Matthew, but pop quiz, what are these small orb-shaped objects on the road?
Well, those would be little explosives.
Yes, those would be little explosives.
Mines.
Let's watch this guy decide to terminate his position as an MTLB driver.
Oh, tell me he's not going to drive straight over it.
Nope, he drive right over it.
Why?
I have no idea.
Was that intentional to do that?
It had to have been. I don't know why why this guy couldn't see him.
That might have been intentional.
Look at this! What a goober! He blows up the tank! And so this guy just climbs out of it, sits down on the ground, and he just starts looking around. He's probably, well, you know, probably because his eardrums have been busted out, but at the same time, he's just like, well, guess the tank doesn't exist. And he's literally sitting by another mine! And another one! So now he just gets up and he walks away. And now he sits down again. Actually, it looks like he's Slav squatting.
I wonder if he was just trying to get injured so he could get taken off the front line.
Maybe, but it doesn't really look like he got injured at all. I mean, like, you know,
He was hoping to.
His ears are probably ringing like nothing ever before because, you know, the mine went off right by him. But, like, what in the world? I mean, how in the world? I mean, you can see these things clearly. They're casting a shadow across the road. It's not like they're recessed into it or anything. They're clearly on top of it. And this idiot just decides to drive right on top of them. What in the world? I can't even get it. Let's see. He says, no low. He has no clue. Some people are saying days, cleaning out his underwear. Let's see. 1 second, man. They gotta get rid of a bot. Let's see. Maybe on the vodka, cargo 300. No, there's no cargo 300 or 200 there. He didn't even look wounded. He just looks like he went for a little bit of a tizzy. What? I just can't understand it, y'all. I don't even know where to go with that. What a dumb guy. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see an incredibly rare sighting. A Ukrainian Tunguska engaging a drone. Let me unmute this. Here we can see Ukrainian Tunguska getting ready for its next meal. That was a terrible impression. When you see it fire off its missile towards the Shahed. And then the video ends. But do y'all know how rare this is? Ukraine only has like 20 or 26 Tunguskas in their entire armed forces. And so seeing one of these things is like seeing one of the most endangered animals on the planet in terms of this war and the vehicles that are being used. And it's honestly, it's really interesting to see. I never thought we would actually see video footage of one of these things in use, considering that they're in such small numbers. The Ukrainians would prefer to keep them in reserve, but we finally saw one. And how cool is that, really? But with that, we're moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can then see some Ukrainian soldiers firing at the Russians with what appears to be an SPG-9, although I wasn't really certain. We see it fire it. You hear them opening up the breach. We now see the guy loading another round. Firing it again. Firing again. They're not even taking any fire right now. I think they've taken the Russians by surprise. Yeah, it's an SPG-9, that's for certain. But with that, that's the end of the video. And once again, an interesting little look at the Ukrainians firing an SPG-9 at the Russians. It looks like they had a small little fire team, most likely that helped carry the SPG-9 to this position, that were standing by, just in case things got a little difficult. But it looks like they got the Russians by surprise, most likely, or they were firing this at an incredibly long range. Moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, we can also see the local landfill. I mean, Russian camp. Let's take a look at their living conditions in this specific part of the front lines.
У орків все як завжди.
Nice and clean.
Чисто, все прибрано.
Was that a diaper on the ground?
Жили.
Probably. I mean, like, imagine if you're a Russian soldier. let's look at that again. Where is it?
No, it's not a diaper. Never mind.
Тут вони жили. Тут теж хата така з ремонтом.
The hell kind of building is that?
I don't even know.
Акуратненько, за феншуєм все зроблені. Песик.
Oh, doggo.
Wait, doggy? Where? I was looking over the Aw.
It is crept out.
Песик.
It's like, oh,
Poor
hello.
doggo.
it's like there were some very sick people here. How are you doing?
It came out like it's been in there forever.
It came slinking out like it was its home. It was like, well, what are you doing on my property? What a cute dog. I like that dog.
Poor
Так
dog.
усюди. Де б орки не жили,
They just trashed the
Yeah.
whole place.
просто придивляюся тому, як можна в такій чистоті жити. Ну,
Oh my
справді,
god! That's like 3 feet of garbage.
охайні такі люди.
You know, they need to change the Russian army's song to rats. Rats. We're the rats. Because they live like rats. I mean, like, look at this garbage. Who in the world lives in this kind of filth? Like, where are the senior officers that are requiring them to clean this stuff up and make sure that there's some kind of discipline in the unit? Like, this is just, this is a disgrace to soldiery around the entire world. This is just awful.
Ну, тут вони ж.
Like, bullets are scattered across the floor. Like, you want to reload a magazine, just start sifting through the trash, and you'll find some 5.45 rounds eventually. This is just horrendous. And I bet y'all can all agree that this is some pretty rough stuff right there. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next clip of Location Unknown News, where you can see some Mista S's being taken out by the Ukrainians. Here we can see the Mista S's, one to the right, one to the left. And then, like magic, the Ukrainians make them disappear one at a time. Boom, the first Mista S is gone. And then a second later, boom. Pop, the second Mista is gone. Both of those shots landed directly on the rooftops of those Mistas. And it's incredible to see that Ukrainian artillery is so accurate, and amazing to see that Russian artillery is that incompetent that the Mista S, which is one of Russia's farthest firing SPGs in their entire armed forces, can be that incompetent and that inept to have artillery triangulated to their position and destroy them in 2 simple shots. Russians hate them. See how Ukrainians remove thousands of tons of weight with one simple trick. And so that we're going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see another Mista S that was vaporized somewhere else on the front line. There's the gun.
Дуло лежит в саушке. Так, дома разбитые.
You know, that gun's almost intact. Like, it's just like they picked it up out of the tank and just dropped it off there.
Так вот. Русский мир прошел. И вот тут он и остался.
You now see him showing off some more shrapnel of the leftover Mista. You see that right there, Matthew? That little kind of like Lego piece looking part that's on the ground?
Yes.
That at one point was the axle for the wheel.
Really?
Yes. That's how many parts this thing got blown into. And you can actually see a whole axle right there. That's how badly it got blown apart, is that it's just literally in pieces across this whole area. Here's a part of the track. Here's a little bit more of the hull. That actually looks like a bit of the transmission, or the rear of the Mista.
Так вот расхуячили мы их.
Oh, look, Matthew, it was...
Расхуячили.
Look, it was like one of those nuclear bomb shelter things we saw up near Brown's Ferry in those people's yards, you know, like the dirt-covered thing. Like, they got those in Ukraine.
That's weird.
I think
it's
that-
hard to think we have those in Alabama too.
Yeah, we do, actually. We saw a couple of them, just in case y'all don't know, up north near the Browns Ferry power plant in Huntsville. And we wondered what those were. We asked one of the plant security people that came out with an M4 that was filled with plastic rounds.
And a flag in the chamber.
Yeah, that was, anyways. We will cover that story probably at another time. Anyways, that is really interesting to see they have one over there, but I feel like that's probably not a fallout shelter. It's probably some kind of a cold storage or something like that, where you can put stuff underground and it'll stay kind of cool. I'm not really sure, but still really interesting to see. And it's also nice to see that this whole entire area has been littered with Mista S parts, and also you can actually see one of the wheels, the road wheels of the Mista S, sitting on the side of that little cellar. It's right there, and you can see another one to the left of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, pretty cool. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see even more captured Russian equipment. A whole warehouse of it, actually.
Банька, встанька, що таке? Приготуй собі пакет. Ха. Fuck
This
you.
guy gonna sing. Oh, wow.
You said, man, that's his response to you saying this guy's going to sing.
Yeah, it was perfectly timed, too.
Yeah, you said this guy's going to sing, and then he immediately said,
Fuck you.
That was perfect timing.
oh, man,
Пидорашка, блядь. Рекс!
But they captured a lot of trucks right there. And also, it looks like that guy told Matthew off. I'm sorry, Matthew. I didn't mean for him to be that rude. But still, what an interesting video. And interesting to see that all of these trucks are in some kind of state of rot. This one is completely missing any kind of workable tire. It looks like they may have dry rotted right there. Also, that one looks like it may have come off.
Встанька, що таке? Приготуй собі.
More dry rot. More dry rot on the other one. We can see some kind of BTR in here. It looks like the wheels are fine on that one, but everything else is messed up beyond belief. And so with that, we are on to the next clip before this guy tells Matthew off again, sadly, where we can see that the Ukrainian soldier is having a cat nap. A literal cat nap. A cat sitting on his face. So here's the video, and it's really cute. See this guy looking at the soldier on the ground. And that's the soldier's helmet, that's his face, and there's a cat pretty much sleeping on his face.
Poor cat.
Poor cat. I hope it stays as a pet of this unit. And also, it's just a nice little video to see, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians aren't cruel to animals like the Russians have been. We've seen the Russians do all kinds of atrocities to the animals, not just the Ukrainian civilians and citizens. And so it's nice to see the Ukrainians still give a care about small little poor cats and dogs that, you know, have been raised their entire lives by their family, and they have no idea what's going on in this war. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see a vaporized T-80 BV. I put BVM in the caption, but it's actually a BV. There's the turret, there's some pieces of it.
Попалося, загорілося. Від 3 сімерочки наші спрацювали, попали в нього, задимівся, погорів. Розлетівся корпус. Корпусу там частина, тут частина, тут.
There's another part of the tank over there.
І гусениці, пішли отак. І частина гуслі залетіла аж туди в домик і вибила оце вікно. Тут
The Ukrainians must be the best at conducting turret tosses on Russian tanks. Because this tank, the way it blew up, it's obvious that that tank had to have flown. And sadly, we didn't get to see how far that turret went, but that thing was definitely flying at a time, because this tank is gone. It's just it's in pieces, literally, like the Mista S we saw earlier. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our final bit of Location Unknown news, where we see a Ukrainian tank on the move. I think this has music playing over it, but let me check. Nope, it doesn't. Alright, so let me get this in 720. Shit! They're drifting.
Wow. It's all fun and games till the track pops off.
Yeah, probably. And also, what a video. These guys are really putting this little tank through its paces. Unfortunately, I can't tell y'all what kind of tank this is. It looks like the road wheels are of a T-72. Let me check that real quick. Hang on. Road wheels. This thing's got 6. This thing has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it does look like a T-72. It looks like one of the Ukrainian modified versions of the T-72 that they had pre-war. So it's really cool to see. And also, they're putting this thing through the paces. This thing is going high speed. It's taking some very sharp turns. And that drift was pretty impressive to see. So let's run that one more time. Jeez. And he's got great control of it, too. But with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the standard Ukrainian rank and file are able to drive these tanks like race cars. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into, well, actually not into, we're going to be moving out of the location unknown news and on into the next bit of news here in the Northeast, which we only have one bit today to cover. We saw the Ukrainians captured an MTLB, and they used the Ukrainian MTLB to transport the captured one. So here's the video. There's the Ukrainian MTLB, and there's the Russian MTLB. Also, they tipped over some ammo boxes, but no big deal. So with that, that's the end of that little video, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are literally just replenishing their armored forces. They're literally using the exact same armored personnel carriers to transport the captured Russian ones, and that one will probably be added to a unit somewhere at some point. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and it's once again a nice sight to see that the Ukrainians have never really stopped their momentum and are still overrunning Russian forces enough that they're able to capture vehicles almost at a steady rate these days, probably at the same rate they're losing vehicles, or even at a higher rate than that. With that, of course, war is not always the fun, the cheering, the Ukrainian soldiers advancing forward and liberating town after town, and seeing the people come out crying with tears of joy that their town has once again been liberated by the Russian oppressors. At times, and still to this day, a large amount of Ukraine and a lot of Ukrainians are still behind the Russian-occupied lines, and they're being subjected to things we can't even imagine at this point, considering we have no news of it. But in liberated areas like Izium, the news is starting to become more clear each day as it goes by that the Russians committed heinous atrocities against Ukrainian citizens there. And today we got another video courtesy of Radio Free Europe that showed us the massive amounts of torture chambers that were created for Ukrainian citizens that the Russians may have deemed as, I guess you could say, political dissidents, or they suspected of some kind of crime. And so without further ado, I'm going to show y'all this video once again that gives y'all the reality of what the Russians really are doing in Ukraine. They're not liberating people. These people behind the front lines, I'm entirely sure now, they're not safe at all. And every single day they're probably living in fear of the Russians doing something to them next. And it really puts into mind what this war really is. And of course, a lot of people don't think about this kind of stuff. A lot of people like to kind of scoot it under the rug. But what the Russians are doing here in Ukraine is the exact same thing that we swore would never happen again after the Second World War and what we saw happen at the concentration camps. We said that those kinds of atrocities would never be committed to a group of people again as long as we had breath in our bodies and the United States still stood. And here we are, watching in Ukraine, the exact same atrocities happening again. This time, not by the Germans onto the Jewish people and others. This time, it's by the Russians onto the Ukrainians, which they believe are inferior. And so with that, here's the video of what the Russians really do to Ukrainians.
Плюс-минус. Я там на голове был мешок. Да, здесь. Здесь били током, получается, а там били так. Подвешивали на что-то, я не знаю, он наручники. Висел на наручниках, били палками, там, ну, короче, руками, ногами. Полили бычки, там, спичками жгли руки, есть шрамы. Ну, такое. Стреляли, там, заставляли танцевать, как бы, прострелили ногу. Говорили, танцуй. Не танцевал. Прострелили ногу.
Велика кількість кожного дня звертається родичів, які повідомляють про те, що їхні знайомі, їхні родичі були закатовані або підвергалися катуванню та знущанню з боку військових Російської Федерації.
Вони не били по обличчю, вони били тільки по ниркам, по печінці, по спині вони також гарно проходилися. А саме таких шрамів вони старалися не лишати. Я не знаю чому. Це місце для мене такого переосмислення, місце. Монахи дали мені шанс вижити саме. От, якби не вони, певно, я би не вижив взагалі. Вони врятували мене.
And with that, that's the end of that video. And once again, gives you a bit of an idea of what has been happening in occupied areas of Ukraine. And it kind of fills you with a bit of dread, although I always try and keep an optimistic tone, of the Ukrainian armed forces and what they'll be facing in the future. As they continue to roll through these areas, what will we actually uncover that the Russians have been doing to normal people in their day-to-day lives? In the liberated areas already, we've seen that the Russians have killed hundreds, if not thousands, of Ukrainians for really no reason rather than to just do it. We've seen them torture hundreds, if not thousands, of Ukrainians just for the reason of doing it. And so it makes one question what's happened in places like Mariupol or Melitopol or Kherson that we don't know about yet because we haven't made it there. But, of course, the job has to be done, the land has to be liberated, and hopefully we can liberate it sooner than later so that way this kind of torturing and suffering doesn't have to occur every single day until this war finally ends. And so on that a little bit of a low note, we're now going to start moving towards the frontline news in the northeast once more, and on towards the Donbass, the south, and Kherson. But before we get to all of that news, we're going to take one quick pause to address our polls, and also to address our questions from the live chat. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so at the moment we have 2 polls to address, and the first one said, do you think the Russian drove over the mines intentionally? It looks like 53% said no, it was just a stupid Russian. 27% said yes, it was purposeful, and 19% said I can't really tell. Now, to me, it looked purposeful. I'm not sure, unless they were like just dog drunk, how you could possibly just drive over mines like that. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I really don't even know where to go with that one because the guy was just so freaking stupid. Like, regardless of whatever his goal was, whether he was drunk or stupid or if he saw it and he was trying to, end himself, that was just so freaking dumb. I would honestly have to say, I guess the guy was just stupid. That would be my answer. Because there is no way that you can see those things and then drive over them. It almost seems like he tried to line up his track to run right over one of them. So, I don't know. It may be deliberate. I'm honestly going to have to fall into it. I'm not entirely sure. I think that'll be my final answer. And so with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and the next poll said, do you think that most of the war crimes being committed by Russia have yet to be discovered? It looks like an overwhelming 90% said yes, there is much more to find. 7% said it's too early to say, and 3% said no, we already know the major ones. Now on this one, sadly, I think there's going to be more to find, but it's better that they get found so that way they can be held accountable later instead of simply allowing the Russians to cover it up. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that if I had to go with one of those options, I'm going to have to go with the overwhelming majority saying, yes, there's much more to find. There's one thing that a lot of people may not, remember because it's been so long, is that nobody had an idea of the atrocities that had been committed in the Bucha Hospital European area until it was liberated again by the Ukrainian armed forces about a month after the Russians got there and were fighting in those suburbs. Until then, we had no idea that the Russians had been gathering up people and shooting them inside of basements and in the streets just as they bicycled by or walked by. We had no idea that that had happened up there. And so with that in mind, and of course seeing that we had no idea, Actually, I don't really know how 3% of people said that we already know the major ones, because we didn't know that Izium was a major site of an atrocity until the Ukrainian armed forces liberated that area as well. And then we started to see all the torture chambers and the mass graves that had been put around the city due to all of the people that the Russians had killed. For that reason, I believe that here in the south specifically, there are going to be a lot of atrocities that we don't even have an idea of yet. There's probably going to be loads of mass graves outside of Melitopol and Tokmak, certainly Mariupol. We already know of some 14,000 graves that are outside of the city of Mariupol alone, most likely in Berdyansk, Kherson, and I'm sure that as Ukrainian armed forces roll through, we'll continue to get great news of them liberating these towns and the people that are there just being elated knowing that they will be able to live in a free Ukraine again. But at the same time, they'll also find all of these things as they continue to go through. It will be an unfortunate fact and something that the world will have to remember and ensure that Putin and the entirety of Russia is held accountable for. Because one thing that a lot of people don't think is that, one thing that a lot of people think is that the Russian people as a nation aren't really accountable for these kinds of things. It's the army. But let me ask you all this. Where did those soldiers come from? They don't come from some kind of a lab. They don't come from some kind of some place in the middle of nowhere where they just grew up as like Spartans, as soldiers their whole lives. These people are the citizenry of Russia. The Russian army is made up of the Russian people. And these people are marching into Ukraine, and almost all of them, from what we can tell, are committing atrocities on some kind of scale, whether it be looting houses and robbing them of everything, doing heinous acts I won't even mention to women that we've heard about often, and also torturing and executing people or committing genocide against them. They've done almost everything that you can think of on a war crimes list to tick them off as war criminals. And so I think that we should make sure at this point that the entire Russian nation, not just the government, not just the army, the entire nation needs to be held accountable for these crimes that have been committed until something happens. Either the Russian government flips and there's a new one installed, or until the end of time, because the Russians have never been able to play ball. They've always committed atrocities the entire time they've existed in modern history, either as the Soviet Union or the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation, of course, has a long history. They did it to the Chechens, they've done it to the Georgians, now they're doing it to the Ukrainians. And I think enough is about enough at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one if we have one. And if not, we're on to the live chats.
All right, so we are now moving on to our super chat questions. And up first, we have an $84 donation from none other than Tengen, formerly known as Tengen Bragiri, who says, hit the like button, everyone.
And thank you so much for the support, Tengen Bragiri. And I also agree with you so much that if everyone hit the like button, it would help us a lot. Of course, hitting a like button promotes us to more people around YouTube. And then more people see this news, and then more people subscribe, and they watch the news. It helps us to grow our fundraisers. And of course, it helps people to be apprised of the news. So it's all around a great thing for you to hit the like button, and it helps out this channel massively. And so thank you so much for the merciless plug, Tangan, for the like button. And that's something we don't do a lot on stream, is trying to plug like buttons or subscribership. A lot of people do that, and sometimes I feel like it's distasteful. Also, that's another thing that I do not do, is that on these live streams, we could have sponsorships. Like, we could stop the stream and be like, this stream is sponsored by NordVPN. Nothing against NordVPN or anything, or anyone who wants to sponsor a channel, because, you know, on videos in the future, like normal videos, not live streams, we may try and get sponsors. But on streams like this, especially covering things like we're talking about, like atrocities in Ukraine, it always seems really odd for someone to go, and you know, all of those people got tortured and killed by the Russians. And now a word from our sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. It doesn't really seem like a good thing to do. So we've never really done that. And, you know, we don't plug anything for that matter. But since you brought it up, if y'all would like to subscribe, it would help us out massively. Also hit the bell button and hit the like button as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, Tangan, for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $50 donation from Livy Washington, who says, thank you for being amazing. Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, and Slava LSA. Please pass my question to someone in the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Livy. It helps us out a massive amount. helps us to keep this thing running, and thank you so much for calling us amazing, because I honestly think that the entire Elite Spring Army, all 9,000, well, not 9,000, 8,202 people that are on tonight are incredible. And I thank y'all all so much for enjoying the stream and watching it, because y'all are as amazing to me, well, a lot more amazing to me than y'all probably think I am amazing to y'all. And so that we are going to answer a live chat question sponsored by you, Livy. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this question goes to Justin Norse, who's been putting in a lot of good live chat questions tonight. He says, Enforcer, should the U.S. consider moving B-52 and B-2 bombers into the European theater to put the Russians on notice for deterrence?
I think that is most likely what NATO is trying to do. NATO doesn't really work as an offensive or a preemptive strike organization. It's entirely built as a defensive alliance. And so this, I guess you could say, buildup of force that we've been seeing a little bit, specifically in air power, is most likely to send the message, if we will not attack first, but if we are attacked, we are ready within minutes to respond. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. Of course, we could get into a massive breakdown of what kind of aircraft are active. We know that the United States is using a massive amount of drones and AWACS right now, along with the entirety of NATO. Some of these aircraft are actually NATO coalition aircraft that are flying in the borders of the Baltics, Poland, and also some of the southern NATO states. And I would have to say, they've been doing a fairly good job at sending the message to the Russians that we are ready for whatever will happen next, and there's no way that the Russians can get a one-over on us. We will always be one step ahead. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well again. And thank you so much once again, Livy, for sponsoring a live chat. That was an incredible thing that started on this channel, is that people support us and help us to keep this thing going, but y'all also allow other people in the live chat to have their question answered. I think that's incredibly kind of y'all. It shows that y'all have great kindness to do something like that. And also, I hope that everyone in the live chat enjoys that as well, because we get to the live chat questions early these days. But thank you so much once again, and we are on to, I believe, the final question of the segment.
And yes, this is the final one of the segment, and it goes to BC Skyman once again, who puts in a $50 donation, I believe for the second time. So thank you very much for that, BC. We appreciate it. He says, my friend was in Germany, Central Command, and he called me, and he witnessed the executions. He was absolutely disgusted that NATO was going to sit back and not stop them. Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you for the support. And that is actually really interesting to hear. So, let's see. And he called me and he witnessed the executions. That's interesting. Did he witness them through the satellite imagery? Because I know that the satellite imagery came out about 2 weeks before Ukraine liberated the village, that people were laying dead in the streets just en masse. And I would like to hear a little bit more detail on that story. That would be actually something interesting to hear. But it disgusted everyone in the world when it finally came to light what kind of atrocities had been committed over there. And I'd have to say that things like that aren't supposed to happen in modern wars, but the Russians don't think in a modern way. They think in a way of how I don't even know how they think, because even back then, in the 1900s, the early 1900s, there was still an expectance of decency and a level of, I guess you could say, respect of the privacy and the care of citizens in the First World War even. You wouldn't see a lot of civilians directly get targeted and killed in that war, although in World War II you certainly would, and really towards the end of World War I you kind of would with the airship attacks and all, but still, we'll move on from that. Anyways, I would have to say that it was certainly atrocious, and I thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad he was also appalled with everyone else, because I hate to think that there are people out there somewhere that sit there and go, yes, that's what should be happening, and there should be more of it, because there are people like that out there somewhere, and I just don't understand why. I don't understand why they got to be like that. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and I hope I was able to address that comment fairly well. And with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're going to be moving on to our final segment of news for the night, starting off in the northeastern area near the town of Svatove, where we saw some Russian Mi-35s in action. According to the caption, they're conducting a military operation in Ukraine. We see them firing off the unguided rockets. Oh my god, it's another loading montage. Do they do these every time? Now you see the Mi-35 taking off again. We can now see it flying off. We can now see some Mi-17s taking off. We can see the rockets being launched. We now see it being fired from the other side of the cockpit. Does this guy have a beer gut?
He's sitting back pretty relaxed to be flying a helicopter.
Yeah, he is. Like, how in the world does he even see over the sides? Like, his eyes are almost at level with the side of the cockpit. Now you see an Mi-17 coming back. And that rounds out the video. But once again, these helicopters really aren't doing anything to change the situation on the front lines. They are about as powerless as the infantry to change what's going on there now. With that, we're moving on into the next clip of news on this area of the front line, where you can see that the 80th Air Assault Brigade has also been taking a crack at the Russians with their drone forces and also their artillery. We can see the drone flying off, and we can now see some Russians walking through a field. We now see a mortar round land right by this crowded BMP, and now we can see it flooring itself and also flinging off the occasional Russian here or there.
They're not even going to stop for him.
No, they're not. He's got to run off to the tree line. He's got to fend for himself now. I wish I could do the David Attenborough voice pretty good here, but I'll give it a shot.
Here we can see the BMP-2 throwing off the runt of the litter. The runt will have to fend for itself or die to the elements.
That was a terrible one. I'm sorry.
Are you okay, Mr. Attenborough? You sounded a little hoarse.
I'm having a stroke right now. Call the ambulance.
But we can see the artillery landing near another group of Russians. And we can also see the artillery lining up something. I couldn't even tell what kind of vehicle that was, but it's been blown up. They flipped over a car. They blew up some more Russian equipment. Someone said improving. You're lying. And some people are like, it's a good impression. No, it was not. That was terrible. But with that, you can see there that the 80th Air Assault Brigade's been doing a pretty good job on the Russians once again. And hopefully we'll see more ground taken in the meantime. Moving further on down towards Verkno-Kamyanka, we can see that a captured Russian POW was found. And surprisingly enough, Matthew, it was a female soldier. An incredibly rare sight, specifically for either side. As far as we can tell, females on the Russian side make up something like 6 to 5% of their armed forces and are usually put into auxiliary positions where they'll not be in frontline combat. But one interesting thing to note here is the belt. Russian soldiers usually do not wear a belt like that, and so this suggests that she's either from the LPR or the DPR. She was captured on the front lines, and she told the story that she is there fighting as an infantryman because her husband was called up to serve and she took his place. So here's the video.
Должность какая?
Рядовой.
Рядовой, ты медик, кто ты?
Медик.
Медик? Самозвідки. Родом звідки? Родом звідки? Откуда родом?
С Воронежа.
Правду говорю. Долго тут? Долго здесь?
16 августа.
Угу. Мобилизирована, чи сама пришла?
Когда мобилизация началась, я сама пришла, как мужа не забрали.
Угу.
So that's the end of the video, and it gives you an idea of what's going on the front lines and how desperate the Russians really have gotten, or the DPR or LPR have gotten, is that they just want to meet quotas. They don't even care. And also to note, the woman looked, from her hair, she looked like it may have been gray, and that tells you what kind of people they were trying to recruit in the first place, considering her husband was most certainly as old as her and probably in worse health, and that's why she volunteered to step up and take his place. And that's how much they're scraping the barrel, is that they're pretty much recruiting old people that you would see in the United States as retirees who are enjoying the end of their career and the beginning of their retirement, and they're bringing them to the front lines to fight for them. And so that's just lame. And also some people are saying that her husband's a coward. How do we really know? because then again, her husband may have had a failing health or something, and she thought, well, if he goes to the front, if he even tries to go to the front line, he might die, so I'll take his place. I'm not entirely sure. It may be a little bit of a tragedy of a story, really, but gives you an idea of how desperate the Russians are for manpower. So with that, we're now going to be moving further down the front line to the area of Berestove, where we saw that the Russians did it again. They did it again. You're not going to believe this, Matthew. They piled up the landmines in a massive pile in the open air on the side of the road again.
No way.
Yep, they did it. There they all are, right there.
In sight, too.
What the... Like, why do they do this? But you can see the mushroom cloud form in the distance once the drone flies away and the footage is cut for a second. So the drone takes a good look. The drone will then back off, and now you can see the small atomic explosion occur in the distance as all those mines go up at the exact same time.
That's the only thing that they'll ever put in a pile is mines. They won't put their trash in a pile. They won't do anything but mines.
Well, they'll put bodies in a pile of their own quite well, too.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And we can now see the remnants of where that was. It's just left a nice large crater and a mostly destroyed truck about 50 yards, well, not 50 yards, about 20, 30 yards away. In fact, that flattened that whole tree line. If we look at that earlier, it had some lush greenery to it right here. Trees all the way down it. We go up to here. It looks like World War I in no man's land. And the Russians are once again out another 120 mines or so. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are very keen-eyed with finding these large ammo piles and blowing them up. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down towards the area of Pokrovsk, where we saw that Ukrainian artillery was in action and firing at the Russians again. This footage, according to the caption, was taken within the last 2 weeks somewhere in the Bakhmut area, and so here's the video. Also, I can't play the music, but when you see some Russians walking around, some more Russians walking around, even more Russians walking around. And now you can see the artillery coming down. I mean, you see a Russian frolicking in the field. We can also see another one doing a crip walk through another field. This one appears to be rolling. The artillery is still coming down with the same fervency that it had at the start. We now see that all of them are enjoying, wait a minute. This guy, Matthew, I don't mean to say this, but this guy, took something up the rear.
Oh.
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 Also, the artillery was largely effective, though, as it did get the unit.
Oh.
And so with that, that's the end of the video, but once again, an interesting look at the Ukrainian artillery, its accuracy, and how it's able to keep the Russians largely at bay, and probably thwart a lot of their efforts to try and take the area. With that...
And unfortunate side effects.
Wait a minute, Matthew, I don't mean... I know that someone's going to be like, how distasteful, but I was just thinking on this one. Ow, something bit me. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on to the next bit of news. And of course, the Russians in this area, considering that that's the reality of the front lines across the entirety of this area, are desperate for any kind of good news to give to the Russian public. Well, they finally got it. The Russians have taken a hill, and they're going to make this thing massive. Russian units in Ukraine claim to have occupied a strategically important height under cover and in operation with the tank platoon. And as this video goes on, you will see that there is no hill in sight. Here's the video. When you hear the Russians playing some kind of club music, we can now see the tank pulling out of the tree line very slowly. And now moving down the road very slowly. We can now see this tank continuing to fire. And now we can see what appears to be artillery-sized rounds hitting in the distance, which makes no sense. They're continuing to fire, and what's interesting to me is that they say they're taking a hill, but the footage they're showing in front of us shows a perfectly flat field. So, unless they're calling a molehill a hill, there is no hill here. I feel like this would be a Tom Scott video, Matthew.
I'm here in the middle of Ukraine, and some people will call this a hill. But in reality, it's not really a hill, you know, because he did a video like that.
That guy can make anything interesting, basically.
That guy can make grass interesting. I got to tell y'all, one YouTuber I like a whole load is Tom Scott. I have a massive amount of respect for him. He covers these really interesting niche little topics, and he can make them the most interesting thing in the world and cover it in 3 to 4 minutes in one take. And y'all don't, and I know I do a lot of improv. I do 3.5 hours of it every single day for 6 days a week. But for Tom Scott to get in front of a video camera and record for a video that's not for a live audience and be able to read off something like that perfectly on the first take without any edits, that is actually really impressive to me. And I got a lot of respect for him for doing that. But with that, we'll say the Russians have not really captured anything because they're firing at the exact same spot they started at the beginning of this video. And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, the Russians are trying to tell the world that they are doing something. And now it's been changed from taking cities to now they've taken what appears to be a slight incline on the side of a massive plain. With that, we're now going to be moving towards Popasna, and we finally found out why the Russians are digging trenches in straight lines. It's because they're using a trench digging machine that digs the trenches in straight lines. Here's the video. Mostly it's going to take a solid year for them to dig about 100 yards of trench with this thing. But one thing's for certain, that's why the Russians are digging straight line trenches. This thing apparently cannot dig any other variant of a trench rather than a straight line. And so they just continue to dig them like that. There you can see the straight line trench it's making. That's the end of the video, but once again, a pretty interesting look at why exactly the Russians never dig the trenches in anything other than a straight line. So with that, we're now going to be moving further down the line and towards the area of Orlivka, where we saw that a Ukrainian got showered with dirt as a mortar shell landed just feet away from him, and he ended up being A-OK. And so here's the video.
Заебал він, бля. Дивись, куди в'їбав. Куди вгатив? До.
Oh. And he's fine! That's the best part about it. It was close. I'm sure that it scared the living daylights out of him. But he's perfectly okay. So rather than getting covered in dirt for a bit, he's fine. So with that, that was great to see. I mean, like, not really great that the artillery got that close, but it's great to see that he ended up being okay out of the entire ordeal. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Orlivka area and further down the line towards Zaporizhia. But before we get all the way down there, let's summarize this entire area at the front. There has been no frontline movements that we could speak of today. It appears that the Ukrainians are still inflicting a high amount of casualties on Russian armed forces in the area, but it's not translating into any forward movement for now. And so we'll be waiting for any more news on that in the future, but that is the situation for today. Moving on down to the southern front, there has been absolutely no news from the front line itself, but we did see that the Ukrainian Air Force is diligently helping to shoot down cruise missiles and Shaheds wherever they may be. Here we're going to watch a Ukrainian MiG-29 fire off an air-to-air missile in an attempt to shoot down a Shahed 136. There goes the jet, and there goes the missile. And sadly, we didn't get to see if the missile hit the Shahed, but hopefully it did, and it's great to know that the Ukrainian Air Force is working as hard as they can to try and defend the people of Ukraine and make sure that they don't fall victim to another Russian terror attack. And so with that, it is now time to move on out of the southern front completely and on into Kherson, where we can then see that we have two clips of news. First, the Ukrainians have liberated some somewhat large children at a playground. Here's the video. And these kids are pretty big, and they are also pretty kidded.
Грузины и чеченцы катаются в Херсонском области. Где вы? Где вы? Где вы, кадыровцы? Аллаху Акбар! Субханаллах, куда вы пропали? Да, где вы, кадыровцы? Мы здесь. Сколько?
Приходите, ждем. Вместе. Будет жарко здесь.
Все только начинается. Русские скоро будут завидовать мертвым. Иншаллах, Аллаху Акбар.
Эртияр чөнтан. Გაუმარჯოს.
საქართველოს და ქართულ პარტიზანებს გაუმარჯოს.
What an interesting video, and also, y'all may be seeing, this is a bit of an eclectic mix. We got Georgians, we got Chechens, they're all fighting for Ukraine. And also, I like how they did like this whole little spiel, like they were little kids swinging on a park bench as the Ukrainian army drove by. But with that, that's the end
of
that
kids with AKs.
Yeah, little kids, oh, wait a minute. Little cats with gats. That's probably
yes.
But with that, that's the end of that video. And it's great to see that the Ukrainians, and also their, I guess you could say, volunteers in a way. There's a lot of Chechens that just lived in Ukraine as it was, but a lot of Georgian volunteers that are still there and having a great fun time with helping them liberate the country. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to our last clip of news for the day from the front lines, where we saw that the Ukrainians got a perfectly good Urgon out of the Kherson area. You see them pulling it off, of course, draping the Ukrainian flag onto its antenna, and it's 100% intact. It's in mint condition as far as Russian vehicles go. And so with that, it's wonderful to see that the Ukrainians are still getting free equipment across the entirety of the front lines, but of course, like every area of the front that we've seen today, there is no front line movement to report of in the Kherson area either, and the front line has been remaining stable. And so, before we move to the speech from President Zelensky, we have one last bit of news. It's from the United Nations building in New York. The vote came in, and it was an overwhelming no. Almost the entire world voted against the illegal annexation of the Ukrainian territories by Russia, and let's take a look at all of the abstentions and who voted no. So first off, our first abstention was Algeria, second one Armenia, next one Bolivia, Burundi, the Central African Republic, China, that's an interesting one, the Congo, Cuba abstained, the Democratic People Republic of Korea actually voted against it, along with Belarus, Eritrea, Eswatini, Ethiopia, Guinea. I'm supposing that's Papua New Guinea, or maybe not. Honduras, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, the Lao PDR. What country is that? Anyway, I think they're talking about Laos?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be Laos, but they called it the Lao PDR. Anyways, Lesotho, which in case if you don't know where Lesotho is, because that's kind of a tough one. Lesotho is actually right here. It's in the middle of South Africa. Moving on from that, we got Mali, Mongolia, which abstained, Mozambique, Namibia, for some reason I always want to call it Nambia, I'm sorry. Nicaragua voted against. Voted against. That's an interesting one. Moving on from that, Pakistan abstained. The Russian Federation voted against. And let's see here. Let me actually go back here real quick. Let's go to the Ks. Where are the Ks? Need to find them again. Kazakhstan abstained. Okay, I was just trying to go back and make sure real quick. So moving on into the next one. This one was an obvious one. They, of course, would vote against. South Africa abstained. South Sudan abstained. Sri Lanka abstained. Sudan also abstained. So both of the Sudans abstained. The Syrian Arab Republic voted against. Tajikistan voted to abstain. Thailand abstained. Togo abstained. Uganda abstained. The United Republic of Tanzania abstained. Uzbekistan abstained. Vietnam and Zimbabwe also abstained as well. Beyond them, 143 countries voted in favor of deeming the Russian annexation of parts of Ukraine to be an illegal act. And one reason why I named off every single country that voted against or abstained is that these countries ought to be looked at in particular, particularly the ones that voted against. Now, we can see here that some of them are obvious. Of course, North Korea is going to vote against whatever the rest of the world's trying to do. Belarus is Russia's puppet, so they'll vote that way. The Syrian Arab Republic is getting a large amount of support from Russia, and so, of course, they'll vote the way the Russians vote. But Nicaragua, a little bit of a bold move, don't you think? I don't know, Matthew, but that's kind of...
I would have to say that I think it's a dictatorship from what I'm seeing in the chat, so I wouldn't be too far off from reality.
And I wouldn't say that'd be too far away from reality, but considering that it looks like a Russian sphere of influence may be being created in Central America, maybe it's time that we go down there and make sure that things are okay. Maybe. Because considering that every other country, the 4 that voted no, are either Russia or almost directly connected to Russia, or they're just an outlier, which the DPRK always is. Considering that Nicaragua did that, it's starting to show me that there may be something a little bit wrong with Nicaragua. And maybe there's time for a little government change down there. I don't know, but we'll have to see. Also, another thing, the countries that abstained, while they didn't vote against, abstaining does say a lot. That says that you're not really for saying yes, but you're also not wanting to say no because you're not wanting to be outed from the cool kids group, I guess you could say. So countries like... Let's look through them real quick. Some more interesting ones. Vietnam and also China, which is probably the biggest one. Maybe we ought to take a little bit of special attention to foreign policy in concerns to them in the future. Considering that it looks like they're not really going to vote for what's obvious and what 143 countries in the world voted for, including nations like Brazil, which largely, as far as I can tell, haven't really been too critical of the Russians throughout most of the war. And even Hungary, which a lot of people have been saying is, I guess you could say, pro-Russian at this point, or at least the government's pro-Russian, they even voted in favor of calling this an illegal annexation. Like, there's actually some interesting countries in here that voted in favor of saying it's illegal. For example, let's scroll. Switzerland didn't abstain. That was a really weird one. Usually, Switzerland is a neutral country, and so they don't really try and pick a side. But in the United Nations vote, they did. They said it was an illegal annexation. So a bunch of interesting ones here. Also, Turkey voted that, and for some... Well, let me just say this. Turkey being Turkey and doing what Turkey does, you would think they would abstain, but they voted that it was illegal. So a bunch of countries in here that you... Wait a minute. This is probably the most surprising one, Matthew. I just noticed it at the very start. Afghanistan, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, I believe, was its official name now, voted in favor of saying that the annexation of Ukrainian territories was illegal.
Oh, the Taliban have a soul now.
The Taliban actually has a conscience, which is interesting. What about Iran? Hang on, let's go. Iran!
Where are they?
Wait a minute, hang on. For some reason...
they don't have a box.
Yeah, it looks like Iran didn't get a vote.
What does a black box mean? It looks like Djibouti has a black box as well.
Well, I think a black box means that the plane crashed and they're trying to get the pilot logs as to what happened, but that's kind of odd. It looks like their votes weren't recorded, along with Azerbaijan and Venezuela. Although, who really cares what Venezuela has to say? I know they probably would have voted against, just with how they are right now, but... Very interesting. I'm trying to look through the rest of these and see if there's any others that are shocking. Liechtenstein, apparently. Liechtenstein has a vote in the United Nations. I don't know why, but they do. A country with a population of 30,000 people gets a whole vote in the United Nations. What other countries here? Let's see. Nepal voted. That's kind of interesting, but... let's see. Poland was an obvious one. Let's see. Just going through. I'm trying to find anything else that's interesting. If you see something interesting, Matthew, point it out to me real quick.
Right off the bat, I'm not seeing something. I'm also trying to get my second screen to cooperate over here silently as well. It's like freaking out. It's like having a spasm attack over here.
I mean, like, you know, I also deal with that occasionally on my end, and that's also why I sometimes get distracted. But by and large, I don't see anything too interesting with the rest of the countries that voted in favor. Someone said Saudi Arabia. I was about to say Saudi Arabia, but then I was like, yeah, you know, they usually want to keep in with the in group, although they're a member of OPEC, and, you know, that's not really an in group kind of thing. But still, not. Wait a minute, Serbia voted in favor, but Serbia is Russia's buddy, right? No, they're apparently not. Apparently they're not, because they voted in favor of calling it illegal. So very.
What about Hungary? Where's that at?
Oh, they actually voted in favor of calling it illegal.
Interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of countries that you would think would have abstained at least voted in favor of it. But with that, that's the end of that little bit of news. And once again, it's nice to see that the world is united on one thing, which is calling out the illegal acts of the Russian government and the Russian Federation as a whole. And so with that, it's finally time to return to Kyiv and listen to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky to wrap out this day's worth of news. And so without further ado, here's the speech from President
Бажаю
Zelensky.
здоров'я, шановні українці. Щойно взяв участь в роботі другої міністерської зустрічі країн-донорів, МВФ і Світового банку, які допомагають нашій державі зберігати фінансову стабільність. Ключове питання – це покриття дефіциту нашого бюджету і швидка відбудова критичної інфраструктури, житла і соціальних об'єктів, які зруйновані або пошкоджені ударами окупантів. Йдеться про значні суми – десятки мільярдів доларів для бюджету і fast recovery. Але потенціал демократичних країн значно більший, ніж наявні потреби. Тож консолідуємо підтримку партнерів заради України. Створюємо фінансовий Рамштайн – системний інструмент для постійної підтримки нашої боротьби за свободу. Сьогодні ж відбулось і чергове засідання у форматі оборонного Рамштайну. Доволі продуктивне. Передусім, обговорювали надання нашій державі систем протиповітряної і протиракетної оборони. Чим більш зухвалим і жорстоким стає російський терор, тим очевидніше для світу, що допомога Україні із захистом неба – це одне з найвагоміших гуманітарних завдань для Європи нашого часу. Вірю, що вирішимо це завдання, і я вдячний тим нашим партнерам, які вже вирішили посилити саме таку підтримку нашої державі. Підтримку для ефективного захисту у повітрі. До речі, я хочу сьогодні відзначити бійців наших повітряних сил на південному напрямку. Там досягнуті непогані результати, зокрема збито 4 російські ударні гелікоптери і вже більше 10 ударних безпілотників іранського виробництва. Довелось захищати наше небо сьогодні і на інших напрямках. Маємо позитивні новини з оборонного Рамштайну, пов'язані з додатковим посиленням нашої армії сучасною артилерією. Дякую партнерам. По всій країні сьогодні продовжилось відновлення після дводенної російської ракетної атаки. Тоді були пошкоджені енергооб'єкти на території 12 областей та у столиці. Станом на цей час повністю відновлено технічну можливість постачання електрики у більшості областей. В 4 регіонах роботи продовжуються ремонти, мають завершитись найближчим часом. Наші енергетики у деяких містах і районах змушені застосовувати графіки стабілізаційних відключень. Це потрібно виключно для збереження нормальної роботи всієї енергосистеми в таких умовах. В умовах, коли виробництво електрики знизилось. Я хочу ще раз подякувати усім нашим людям, які поставились до цієї ситуації свідомо і роблять свій дуже важливий внесок у гарантування нормальної роботи енергосистеми України. Варто продовжувати розподіляти своє споживання електрики по годинам всієї доби, щоб у пікові години якомога менше використовувати техніку, що потребує значного обсягу електрики. Хочу сьогодні також подякувати усім головам областей, мерам міст і головам громад, які суттєво скоротили споживання електрики в комунальній сфері. І це важливо. Вкрай жорсткою залишається ситуація у всіх районах, які межують з передовою. У ніч на сьогодні окупанти обстріляли Нікополь Дніпропетровської області з градів і ствольної артилерії. Серед поранених дитина, дівчинка 2016 року народження. Дуже важке поранення. Вранці російські терористи обстріляли Авдіївку Донецької області, центральний ринок. Окупанти били з градів. Станом на цей час у переліку загиблих 7 людей, 12 поранено. Наша розвідка, спеціальні служби, правоохоронні органи з'ясовують всі деталі щодо цих та інших російських ударів. Жоден російський терорист не зможе залишитись невідомим для правосуддя. Ми будемо знати всі імена і всі деталі. Україна притягне до відповідальності кожного російського вбивцю і ката. Від командувачів до рядових, що виконували ці злочинні накази. Не забудемо, до речі, і про пропагандистів терору, усі, хто виправдовує російський терор і підбурює агресії, усі, хто закликає до вбивства і заохочує знущання з наших людей, будуть відповідати на рівні із вбивцями і катами. Вся російська машина терору має бути знешкоджена і буде знешкоджена. Дякую всім, хто наближає нашу перемогу. Дякую всім, хто допомагає Україні. Слава Україні!
So that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that also rounds out our day 232 segment of the news. I thank you all so much for watching if you were here for the news alone, and if you did enjoy, please make sure to subscribe, as these streams run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. We take Mondays off, but every other day of the week, this news is running and covering the past 24 hours of the war in both picture and video evidence. And so with that, thank you so much once again for watching, and we're now going to be moving on into the question segment, where we're going to answer all of the super chats that have been sent in tonight, as well as many live chats as we can. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Yeehaw! All right, and that was a strained yeehaw. My voice is still like messing up a little bit for some reason, not sure why. But anyways, we have 3 polls to get to, and the first one said, where does the responsibility fall for the commission of war crimes in Ukraine? It looks like 86% said a mixture of the above, and it looks like 11% said Vladimir Putin only, 2% said military commanders only, and 1% said field soldiers only. Now on this one, I'm definitely going to fall under the mixture category. I don't think it's any one person's like total responsibility. Obviously, orders come from the top down, but I think there also might be some commission of war crimes going on by the individual commanders themselves. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think it is a mix. I would have to say it's in between Putin, the Russian army, and the common soldiery with all of these war crimes that are being committed. Because Putin can't commit these war crimes on his own. He's not walking around Ukraine torturing each Ukrainian citizen and then putting them into a shallow grave. That's being done by the soldiers in the field and the commanders who are telling them to do this. And so for that reason, I would have to say it's definitely a mix of all of them. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one said, do you think the husband of the female Russian soldier is a coward? 56% said, we don't know enough. 23% said yes, he is probably a coward, and 21% said no, he is probably disabled, etc. Now in this one, I'm going to definitely fall within the we don't know enough category, but it appears that some of you have some strong opinions on that matter. But I just don't think we know enough. But Enforcer, what do you think about that one?
I would have to be honest and agree with you that we don't really know enough. The original inclination is to think, oh, what a coward. But at the same time, it is something that we don't really know a lot about. You know, she could be interrogated later and asked why she made that decision, and we could find out that he was probably close to death or something like that. So there could be a lot of layers of depth and detail that we really don't know about, and I don't really feel confident enough to make assumptions on. So with that, I'm going to have to fall into the I don't really know category. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and for the third and final poll, the question is, how do you interpret an abstention on the UN vote on condemning Russia? It looks like 48% said that they did not want involvement, 36% said they silently sided with Russia, and 16% said none of the above. Now for me, I would have to say that they silently sided with Russia, because if it was important for them to show up and vote on the matter, they would have voted against it if they don't support Russia. But I think not showing up basically means they're siding with Russia. And they didn't want to really go all the way, but they're going to let it kind of be like indirectly known where they stand. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I kind of am in between. It depends on each country's situation. Some of them may have not wanted involvement. Probably a decent amount of them side with Russia, but don't want to publicly say it. So I would have to kind of fall in a mix in between the two. But I still want to go back real quick now that we're in the question segment and also the polls and look at the government of Nicaragua, because I've got to figure out what's going on down there for them to have voted no. Oh boy, the politics of Nicaragua. Well, we're going to dig in here because I got to figure out what in the world is going on for that to have happened. So the president is Daniel Ortega. Let's take a look at. Let's see. He was a previous leader. He was the president. Let's see. Let's see here. We're trying to look through this. Ortega was defeated, and then he came back, and he's here today. I'll see, he engaged in a violent oppression campaign against protesters in response to the anti-Ortega 2018 to 2022 Nicaraguan protests. So it seems like he's taking a book out of, I guess you could say, Lukashenko or Putin's book with cracking down and oppressing the public. Let's see here.
Is he a commie?
It looks like he's kind of heading in that direction, so maybe it's like a Transnistran kind of thing, you know, where they're trying to live through some kind of a glory period, you know, or think that they're going to be living through the olden times or the good old days. We'll see. Look at this. They pulled a Navalny. His government jailed many of those who could serve as his rival in the 2021 election, including Cristiana Chamorro Barrios, daughter of the former president Violeta Chamorro. I'm hoping it's not Chamorro, so I'm going with Chamorro. Ortega's government imprisoned others who opposed him, including a couple of others. In 2021, Nicaragua canceled the operating permits of 6 U.S. and European NGOs. Many critics of the Ortega government, including opposition leaders, journalists, and members of civil society, fled the country in 2021. After his 2021 re-election, the current president of the United States banned Ortega from entering the United States. So it looks like the guy might just be like a soft commie, because we can even see it. Well, yeah, he is a soft commie. He's a Marxist-Leninist. So
there you go.
So I mean, like that's kind of
he's into land reform, wealth redistribution, and nationalization. So that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, you know, so he is what he is. And going off of that, here's what I gotta say. The guy's probably pretty uninformed on the current world situation and how it is. So he probably voted against this claim of illegal annexation, probably because he's sitting there and thinking of the Russians like they're the Soviet Union, because you can see he's a Marxist-Leninist, which is literally the specific Russian flavor of communism. Because a lot of people go, and this is kind of getting into the philosophy of communism and other groups, but a lot of people go and say, oh, there's not really been a real communist government out there. There is. It's just that they never take the exact form that was written. Much like democracies never take the exact form. You'll never find a raw, pure democracy out there. All of them are a certain kind of flavor of democracy. The U.S. is a specific kind. We're a federal republic, but we're still a democracy. By and large, we're under that umbrella. And so Marxist-Leninist is a communist ideology. It's just the Russian flavor of it, considering that Lenin is the founder of this one. So we can see that obviously this guy wants to think of Russia as the Soviet Union still, and they still have these communist ideals, but he's completely uninformed because the Russians have now gone all in on the nationalist imperialist side of things, and they're wanting to reform the Russian Empire, pretty much according to Putin's talking points. So I think that's why he voted against it. And honestly, looking at this guy, he looks like an ignorant, low-down thug, especially with what he's doing in Nicaragua. And considering that the current administration in the United States has banned him from entering the United States, maybe it is time we go down there and help out with a little bit of a government change. I bet the public in Nicaragua may like that, considering that this guy is clearly putting them down. But anyways, with that, we're now going to move on to the questions.
All right. And Enforcer, I always find it interesting, and hopefully this isn't like political. I don't really think it is, but it's always interesting how the communists come in and like promise all this good stuff, like everybody's going to be good, taken care of, and stuff like that. Then they come in there and end up being dictators and end up crushing people. Basically, it's kind of interesting.
Well, what's really interesting with that kind of stuff, specifically talking about history, is that usually the people who promise the most do the complete opposite. You can look at that in anything. Like you can look at Hitler, for example. He promised loads to the German public, and surprisingly enough, he kind of fulfilled some of the guarantees, but not really a lot of them. Of course, I guess you could say for the German public for a very short while before the Second World War, they did have a little bit of prosperity. I mean, cars became affordable in Germany for the most part, and a couple of other consumer things, but that was about it. I mean, the rest of it kind of went to hell in a handbasket, especially with the bureaucracy that would be set up afterwards. But a lot of these guys, they come in and promise so much. You can look at Stalin or Lenin or Mao or Che Guevara or any of them. And you can really look at a whole bunch of others on the opposite end, like Augusto Pinochet of Chile. And they always come in and they never deliver, they never perform. Whether it's a communist regime or some kind of military junta, they just never deliver. You've got to go with the middle route. And a lot of people don't like that because, people always feel like there's got to be extreme change, but you usually just want to go with the middle route because that's one that usually will actually be able to deliver on what they say. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Hopefully not too not really that political, considering it's more of an analytical thing. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our first super chat of the final segment, we have a $20 donation from Phil Tatham, who says, take a question from the chat, please, gents. LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. And we will take a question in the chat, sponsored by you and also Slava the LSA.
All right, and the live chat question goes to, let's see here, Guns SMFL, who says, will the Russians war criminals get hunted forever like the Nazis after World War II?
Sadly, probably not. Considering that the Nazi war criminals fled Germany, a lot of them would end up in foreign countries like Argentina. Some of them ended up in America. And that's always weird to me. Also, it's always weird to me whenever you hear of an SS prison guard living in, like, New York. And and back then you would think, oh, come on, he's like 90 years old. But an SS prison guard of a concentration camp like Auschwitz saying that he did nothing, it's like, is that even believable? And, it really isn't, honestly, now looking back at it and seeing the actual history of it. That's not really a believable story, but somehow they ended up here, and they were hunted down, even when they did end up being 90 years old, we would still try and find them and get them. But sadly, there won't be any situation like that, most likely with Russia, especially if they still exist intact at the end of this war. All of those war criminals will live in Russia, they will die in Russia, and there won't be any exodus of them to foreign countries where they really won't have the protection of a central government. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, and also sponsoring a live chat question. That was incredibly kind of you, and with viewers like you, we were able to keep this channel running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Panama Floyd, who does not leave a comment. But Panama, thank you very much for the support as always. And Enforcer, what would you like to say about that generous donation?
And I would like to say I thank you so much for your support. Didn't leave a comment, which I love comments. I love to respond and talk. But sadly, it didn't leave one. But still, the support means a lot and helps us to keep this channel running. And so I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we've been able to address it fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, NAFO pays us a visit. Superbunker 9000 puts in a $20 donation and says, once again, coffee and donuts for Enforcers. Enforcer, it's nice of you to share donuts with family. Please take a chat question. Slava Ukraine, LSA, best bunch of misfit. I know about J/K.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I would have to say the Lee Spring Army certainly isn't a group of misfits. We have incredible people here. We have, I believe we
lawyers, doctors.
We have lawyers, doctors, former veterans, officers, some nuclear
Physicists.
We also have rocket scientists. We have a massive group of distinguished and very achieved people that watch this stream. I would not call them misfits at all. I would call a large amount of our audience the intellectuals. And so, and of course, isn't that what everyone says, Matthew? You know, like, oh, people that watch this network aren't just the common rabble; they're intellectuals. But seriously, with this group, I've seen so many people with such acumen behind their names that there's definitely no doubt in my mind there's a lot of intellectuals that watch this stream, and I honestly find it a high honor that you'll find me worth watching and worth supporting to keep this channel and this news running. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. They're not misfits, they're really cool people. And also another thing, to address the first part, I don't just give donuts to family. I give them to the people. I'm a people person, and so I give donuts to the people. I just go to college classes and I just give out donuts to people who are in my class because I feel like it's nice. It makes me feel good. People like it, especially in morning classes. Most people hadn't eaten at that point, so they get a little donut or something, and it's nice. I like it. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I believe you wanted us to answer a live chat question.
Yes, and thanks to Super Bunker's support, we're going to answer Matthew Lane's question, who says, do you believe Russia are running out of cruise and ballistic missiles? Big shout out to North Wales, UK. Keep up the good work, lads.
Hey! And before we answer that question, reread it to me in a second, Matthew. But North Wales, believe it or not getting into too much information, but that is actually where my family comes from. At least the one where we inherited our last name. And so it's really cool to know that we got people from North Wales watching. I wish I knew what town you were in. I can't give a lot of information about my own family, but we are from the North Wales area. We really don't know when they immigrated over. Some parts of my family were some of the first Americans to arrive. Some of them seem to have come in later on, more like in the 1850s or 60s. But still, that is really cool. I wonder if you're from Conwy or Carnarvon or Bangor, or from I believe this whole island's called No, I think it's called Anglesey. Yes, it's Anglesey. But still, I can't get a lot of the Welsh names correct. Like this one, that looks like Porthmadog. It's something like Porthmadog or something like that. And also Blanú Festiniog. Like, I can't pronounce that stuff correctly. I don't think I ever will.
Where's the name of the longest town? It's like Lilin and
it's Len Farling. I forgot it which one it is, but it ends with go. But I think the whole name of the town is something like by a stream, two churches by a stream, or something like that.
There it is. It's up there. It's
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, there it is.
I
right
think.
There.
No, that's not it. I don't think.
Yes.
It doesn't end in go.
I believe this is it though. Let me find it.
There's a town like that.
Longest town name in Wales. Someone said they live near Madoc. That is it. It's Lanfar Pwgil. Yes, that is it, actually. They just shortened it down, I believe. They cut it off right here, but that's the whole name of the town. It's
people also ask, how do you pronounce? And they put the whole thing. What's the answer to that question? Press the drop-down box. I'm curious. On the second one. Oh, there's somebody saying it.
That's from the BBC. That's from a British Weather Channel, though, so I don't think we can play the audio. Yeah, I think they'll try and axe us, but let's go to that town now that we've talked about that real quick, Matthew. And let's drop down and take a look at it. And let's see what the longest town name in Wales looks like. Pretty normal, actually. This is pretty normal for like a British village, I guess you could say. What's always interesting to me is that you always think of Britain as being quite old, but most of these houses were probably built in the 60s or the 70s. Which is always weird to me and really throws me off because, you know, there's some towns in Britain, like Chester, that are as old as Methuselah. And then there's towns like these that look like they're about 50 years old at the oldest. Also, I like heat waves. Like, welcome to Heat Waves. It's a hairdresser.
A hairdresser.
Well, actually, that's a really good name for a hairdresser, is Heat Waves. But there's a tomb out here. That's neat. Wait a minute. It's one of those Celtic tombs, isn't it? Yeah, it's the rocks. They put a body under the rocks, and that was how they made tombs in Celtic times. Really cool. I like that. Also, there's this whole thing in Ireland about fairy forts. We won't get into that, but they're old Celtic forts that, for some reason, over time, people started to think that fairies lived in them, and they really thought that. But yeah, I mean, North Wales, a really nice place. Also, Snowdonia is beautiful. I believe we actually drove through this area here with the quarries. Let me drop down on the road and see. Oh yeah, we did, Matthew. Remember all of the slag heaps on the side of the road? When we drove
Yes.
through? Yeah, so we did drive through that road. We'll go further up the way, about right here. Yeah, it's beautiful up there in North Wales.
It is, and you'd also see like the occasional like Caterham drive by going like what? They drive fast on those roads over there too. It's like I don't know, 80 miles an hour. So they drive really fast.
And then occasionally we would usually see a Welshman in the fields with sheep. And if you're from Britain, you can probably fill out the rest of that joke. But in all seriousness, they were shearing the sheep. But it was just such a beautiful place. I love North Wales. Honestly, in my opinion, it was the most beautiful part of Britain we went to. And you can't really elect a part of Britain to be the most beautiful part. Even Britain is beautiful throughout. It's got a wonderful countryside too. It's just amazing. If I had to go to another place, what place did you think was the best looking in Britain, Matthew?
Probably Cornwall down there near Polzeath.
Let's see. I think that was. Let me try and find it. There's Tintagel. Westward Ho. Yeah, I think we drove past that town.
Yes, I remember driving past that.
Let's see. I'm trying to find this town that we were at. It was at an inlet. There it is, right here. Polzeath. All right, so let's drop down here. Oh, it's a bit of a misty day, but still, it was such a cool place. It was beautiful.
Hey, Operator Starsky's in the chat.
Hey, what's up, Operator Starskys? Operator Starskys. What the hell am I talking about? Tall tombs called a kurgan. Let's pull up a kurgan. Kurgan tombs. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Let's go here and let's look at pictures of these. Scythian, is this Scythian Starsky? Because I feel like this may be something from like the Scythian Empire, but I don't know if the Scythians were specifically in this area. When you see one here on the steppe, wow, that's a beautiful mountain range back there. When we see here one of these tombs, I'm supposing. Oh, so these are kind of like the burial mounds, yeah. That's really neat. That's cool. Also, say hey everyone to Operator Starsky. He's in our chat right now. But yeah, I mean, like, Britain is a cool place. Ukraine is pretty cool too, and of course that we're covering the news on Ukraine, but going through a massive rabbit hole on Britain. We did go to Polzeath at a time. We actually ate at a very specific restaurant, the Oyster Catcher, I believe, if I'm correct, Matthew.
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah. This was the one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we came to this restaurant, had this beautiful view of the beach, and we ate some food there. I think I had, what was it? Alehouse pie, which was really good. Some British food is good. Some British food, I guess you could say you have to get an acquired taste for it. I wasn't really a fan of black pudding, mostly because it's just congealed pig's blood, like in a sausage. But still, it was a great place, and the food was very good all throughout. One thing I gotta say, though, is y'all gotta stop it over there with this whole, what's the name of that guy, Matthew? The North Stockpot guy?
Oh, it's Marco Pierre White.
Yeah, y'all gotta stop it with the Marco Pierre White restaurants, because you get this larger than life impression of this guy, and you think that this food will just be incredible, and then you eat it, and it's just average,
And also, Enforcer, real quick, don't mean to interrupt, but they also need to get control of Marco, and they need to add air conditioning to the hotels because it is hot over there in the summer. The summer we went, it was the hottest on record.
It was, in fact, when we went to the Stonehenge, which is also probably the most disappointing thing ever. I hate to say that because I know the Stonehenge is a big deal, but it's small, it's a lot smaller than one would think. Still, it was. Anyways, moving on from that. It was so hot out there that someone had dropped out from heat stroke at the Stonehenge Visitor Center, just dropped out. And so a British person came over there, unscrewed the cap to their water bottle, and started pouring it, just at neck height, pouring
Started
it down
waterboarding around the spot.
Waterboarding, like their mouth is filling with water, and you just hear them on the ground going, and they're going, "Are you okay?" It's drowning them to death. But it was so hot over there. The time we went, both times we went, it was very hot. But still, it was a beautiful country. I loved it. The people over there are incredible. I thought that the people were incredibly nice. Of course, every once in a while there'd be a jeering joke made at the expense of us being American. But it seemed like a lot of people loved us being from Alabama. For some reason, a lot of British people knew where Alabama was. And surprisingly enough, there's a lot of British people who live in Alabama. You can run into a decent amount of them here and there. But anyways, getting way out of this rabbit hole, I thank you so much for the support again. And can we rehear that question?
And the question is, do you believe that Russia are running out of cruise and ballistic missiles?
I believe they most likely are. Also, did Starsky answer that question about the Scythian thing?
I think he did. Let me go up and see if I see it in the live chat here. He said Scythians lived in Ukraine too. Wink, wink.
Hey, so it was the Scythians. I got that right. Hey, that's very cool. I actually thought I was going to get that wrong. But anyways, to answer that question, I don't really know. They have a massive stockpile of Soviet weaponry, and some of these weapons are Soviet era, although some of them are a little bit newer, so it's really hard to make an assessment on that, but I would assume, considering they're not producing new ones, that they're most likely running out of them, or they will be running out of them by the time this war ends. And so, with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for sponsoring a live chat, and also being a Lee Spring Army member from North Wales. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, my daughter, Lorena Sofia, would like to donate a live chat question. Thank you in advance. And Santiago, thank you very much for the support. And also, Lorena, it's good to have you on the stream, and this question is in your honor. So let me go up here and grab it out of our spreadsheet real quick. It looks like the question is going to go to Dr. J, who says, what have you found out about the 4 Ka-52 helicopters shot down in 20 minutes in the Kherson region?
What? Oh, sadly, I didn't hear about that, if that did happen. I didn't get to put that down on the news today. I couldn't find any video or picture evidence of it. But if the Ukrainians shot down 4 Ka-52s today, that's probably all the Ka-52s the Russians had left, and they were all shot down in 20 minutes. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, Santiago. Sorry, I'm sadly won't be able to answer that question all too well because I haven't been able to get any picture or video evidence about it. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for an interesting question, one that's actually beyond my expertise and my knowledge at the moment. And of course, thank you so much once again, Santiago, for sponsoring a live chat. And I thank both of y'all so much for watching this channel, both you and your daughter. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Tim Swenson, who says, College Book Fund, keep killing it, guys.
Hey, I thank you so much for the support, Tim Swenson. College books are way too expensive, especially some of them. I actually saw a book this semester that I had to get that was like $230. And I don't understand how books become that exorbitantly expensive, and I think it's entirely because they are college books. And so with that, I thank you so much for supporting the College Book Fund, as that is something that is pretty expensive when you get down to it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to keep the channel running.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Oats Air, who says, what do you think will happen now that the UN votes are in? Or does UN even have enough enforcement to do anything? Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you for the support. And to answer that question, the UN does not have the enforcement ability because the Russians are on the Security Council. They are an unremovable member. There's no way to vote them off because if you're on the Security Council, you can veto a decision as long as one person on the one nation out of the 5 that are on the Security Council veto an action. It cannot happen. And so if the Security Council said, let's remove Russia from the Security Council, and 4 of them voted in favor, and Russia vetoed it and said no, they would never be removed. So, sadly, it looks like they'll never be removed, and it looks like the United Nations, because of the Russians being on the Security Council, they will never have the ability to enforce anything they want to do against them. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. fairly well. Well, the question fairly well, because it was a pretty good one, and that's why the UN has been largely limited on its abilities over the past decades of its existence. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from MMC, who says, any idea how Russian alcoholic troops operate? Is vodka readily available for consumption? Is drinking punished or condoned by the orc leadership?
Drinking is not really punished by the Russians at all. That's why you see Russians being career alcoholics everywhere, regardless of where they are, at the front, not on the front, inside of Russia. It doesn't really appear that it's disciplined a lot to be a raving drunk. And so with that in mind, to answer that question by and large, I think it's supported, and I think the Russian command is also dog drunk most of the time as well. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And also something interesting, Matthew, that I saw before we move on to the next one, is that Prince Blake said, look up the Integral House in Toronto. Apparently it was built by a math professor that sold his books at an exorbitantly high price. Are you kidding me? What on earth?
He got this house by ripping off the young ones.
He got it by ripping off the younglings. I saw Anakin butchering younglings. Oh my god. How much does the house cost? That is insane. Also, it's ugly looking. It doesn't even look good. Like, what is this interior? How do you really use that?
And also, did this guy just like model the house after like math or something like that, or is he actually like a person that publishes books?
Let's go to the Wikipedia page and read this. The project was commissioned by mathematician James Stewart as a residence incorporating a performance space. And was designed by Bridget Shem and Howard Sutcliffe of the Toronto architectural firm Shem Sutcliffe Architects. Interesting. It's like they're the leaders of this architect group. The name of the house is derived from the mathematical integral symbol, commonly used in calculus, though Stewart's wealth derived from his authorship of widely used calculus textbooks. It has won several architectural awards, I don't know how, including a 2012 Governor General's Medal in Architecture. The house went on sale. How much did it sell for? $18.5 million in 2020.
It's 18,000 square feet.
I always wonder why college professors' income is so low, and I think that's because it's entirely for the reason that they make all of their money off of publishing. Because this guy has made a killing. Interesting. It's also 18...
And Enforcer, don't you really love it when a college professor assigns a book that they wrote, or at least had a part in writing, and then they're like, go buy this book, it's for the class, you have to have it, and then they wrote it.
Well, sometimes I do not like that at all. Other times I find it acceptable because they'll sit there and go, I wrote this book, you can buy it, but you don't need it because I'm going to include a copy of it for free on the internet, and also here's how to plagiarize it, because I have had a few professors, I have one right now that's also done that. That has a book that was authored by them, but you don't really have to get it, so I hate it. But the ones though that write the book and they're like $50 for like a 60-page book, that I cannot stand, and then they force you to get the book. That is incredibly annoying, and I think that's pretty much like robbery or gouging in a way. But still, it's something to see that you can build an $18.5 million house off of ripping kids off with books. One of those things is you're like, hey, is that really okay? And I would have to say that no, it's not really. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. In popular culture, this house was used as a filming location in several episodes of the second season of Star Trek Discovery, appearing as the home of Vulcan ambassador Sarek and his family. What? Okay, whatever. Anyways, we're moving on to the next one, and thank you so much for letting us know about that, because that's just ridiculous.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $230 donation from Oates Aaron. Thank you very much for that very, very generous super chat. He says, for that one specific college book and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Oiser, and also helping me to get that college book. Of course, it helps a lot. It helps me to keep this channel running by being able to get the college books. So with that, everyone give a huge thank you to Oitzer, who just helps me out in an incredibly kind way, and also Slava Ukraini. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, big shout out to Taras Salyuk for putting in a $20 super chat, but without a comment. But Taras, thank you very much for your support, and we do appreciate it. And thank you for being a longtime channel viewer as well. Moving right along, we have a $16 super chat from Kathy Carr, who says, what type of missile could have done that damage to the Mista S? I have never seen that kind of impact before.
We're assuming that kind of, well, actually, to address that, I was just thinking about that. We have seen a Mista like that get vaporized in the first 2 months of the war outside of Tokmak. The thing was torn to shreds, and I think the reason why they blow up like that, and we see them in that kind of state, is because the Mista S carries a load of artillery shells, and the armor on that turret is paper thin. So the turret just evaporates once it gets hit, because the ammunition is exploding with such great force, and the armor is so thin, it really can't hold itself together. So it just goes into a million pieces, and the gun gets thrown into the air a little bit and a little ways away. So I think that's the reason why, and it could have been hit by something as simple as a 155 or a 105 millimeter shell that caused that kind of damage to it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Justin Norse, who says, Enforcer, will an air defense system like the one that is used to protect the White House eventually be in Ukraine? Today is my B-Day. Can I get a U.S. President impersonation, please?
Well, of course you can. And before we do, can you reread that real quick so that way I can make sure to address the question first and then the birthday address second?
Come on, man. Enforcer, will an air defense system like the one that is used to protect the White House eventually be used in Ukraine?
I believe it most likely will be used. I believe the White House uses NASAM surface-to-air defense systems, if I'm correct. And we already know that 2 of those are in Ukraine and being used. Also, Matthew, check your phone real quick. And thank you. So I think those are already over there and being used. So the answer to that question is yes. And also, like, are you sure, Matthew?
Sure about what?
The last thing you sent me right there.
Yes, that is what he asked for.
Oh man. I've got to be.
Come on, man.
I've got to be honest with you. There's only one president that had a voice very distinct enough in the 21st century of politics that has been able to have a voice that was easily done by me. I cannot do the other 3, and that one that you're asking for is one I can't really do too well. So let me see if I can try. Just you turned another year older. I mean, what happened? You're another year older. You're gonna be on up there. I don't know. I hope that's okay. I hope that's what you're looking for. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel out a lot, and I hope I was able to address that question fairly well. And of course, I thank you so much once again for the support, Justin, and I hope you enjoyed that little birthday entrance. Hopefully I did a good one. Also, East Malibu just said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Look, you fool me once, you can't fool me again. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
You want to do push-ups, man? Come on, man.
You lying two-faced pony soldier.
But anyways, we despise our politicians equally. But anyways, up next we have a $15 super chat from Feklar7, who says, "Been around since day 3 on your awesome stream. Could you get the Stingettes to do a victory dance when Ukraine win the war? Slava Ukraine."
Maybe we could get them to do a victory dance. I don't really know. I don't know if we'll have that ability, but we will give it a shot because, of course, Ukraine will win eventually at some point. I don't know how much long, because really at this point, it's not being determined by how long the Ukrainians are going to hold out. It's really being determined now by how long can the Russians just keep on suffering until they just can't. Also, a lot of people are saying that was Jimmy Stewart. I guess so. Also,
Who's Jimmy Stewart?
I got another one that I can do in a second that I think will forgive that one, hopefully. Since we're going to do voice impersonations of 21st century presidents, there's only one I could do okay. So we'll see.
Is it gonna be Bigley?
We'll see in a second. But to answer that one, let's see. Man,
he forgot the question.
Yeah, you made me lose track, Matthew. You said that and you threw me off. I was like, but can you reread it?
Will an air defense system like the one that is used to protect the White House eventually be in Ukraine?
I think we're on to the next one, Matthew.
Let's see here.
Oh no. Oh no.
That appears to be the last one.
All right, so to forgive what just happened there, I would have to do another voice impersonation. Hopefully this one is better. All right, I just want everyone to know we've already done one for the other guy. So the guy I'm about to do, I'm just doing it because I can do the voice, okay? We don't talk about American politics on this channel. If I make critiques about American politics, it's done in equal part. It's always addressing both sides fairly and equally. So just keep in mind that this voice has nothing to do with anything politically. The other one didn't have anything to do with it. This one doesn't either. I gotta preface
get
this.
It out.
Listen, this is going to be the best voice in the history of voices. It's going to be the best. People say that they just already hear it. It's just great. Great voices, voice actors. Billions and billions of dollars were spent to get this voice perfectly. And I hope that this is a better birthday address, Justin, than the one you were hoping for. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I do it the best. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Judo2001, who says, "Happy birthday, boys. Mr. Lunchtime ran into Professor Mortar and confiscated all of his nipple-flavored Gatorade and is sending it to you. Also, isn't a kamikaze drone just a small cruise missile?"
Let's see. Kamikaze drones are small cruise missiles. That's a given fact. Those little things have the exact same purpose. They go a lot slower. They're a lot easier to shoot down in a way. Also, a lot of people like that one, Matthew. Like they are saying that one was really close, which blows me away.
I'm going to give it a go on the next question.
All right. That I'll let you. I'll allow it. But of course, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope we were able to address that comment fairly well. Honestly, I'm kind of getting blown away by people not being able to believe that was a really good voice impression, because I thought it wasn't. But a lot of people think it was. Also, Matthew, I was at college the other day, and have you seen that meme where it was like that president, we've tried not to mention presidents on here by name, but it was the one that we're doing the voice impressions of, and he was playing Xbox, and he said, "I tracked your IP," or something like, "I clipped your IP.
Yes, I saw that.
You live in 123 Sycamore Way, Albuquerque, New Mexico,"
or something like that. It was hilarious as hell. Anyways, with that, we're moving on to the next one. I'm gonna let Matthew take it away.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Open Microphone. Thank you very much.
And of course, I thank you so much for the support. And of course, it helps out this channel greatly. I hope you've been enjoying this question segment, because I'm sure you've been waiting for us to get to this point. And I hope you enjoy the goofs that we're making, because it's pretty funny. But anyways, as people keep on asking me to do Reagan, Matthew. Reagan's a tough one. He's just tough. But I thank you so much once again for the support. It does help us out a lot. And while you didn't leave a comment, it does help out this channel greatly. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
That was huge. Thank you very much. But anyways, moving on to the next one. We have a $10 super chat from John D. Amato, who says, "Enforcer Matt's car commercial impression from yesterday's stream is gold. Thank you both for your hard work and wonderful content. This has become my favorite YouTube channel by far. Bigly."
Okay, first off, just getting this out there, it's not Enforcer Matt, it's me, the Enforcer, of course the greatest. We bring in the ratings every single time.
Okay, but moving on from that, because I think we're about to overdo that one.
These are horrendous.
Yeah, we're about to overdo this into the ground. But everyone's loving the impressions. Everyone's thinking that they're hilarious. But anyways, moving on from that and addressing the question. Can you reread it again? Because honestly, the voice impression on this one's distracting me. So can we hear it again?
And that was a horrendous impression. But John says, Enforcer Matt's car commercial impression from yesterday's stream is gold. Thank you both for your hard work and wonderful content. This has become my favorite YouTube channel.
And actually, the car commercial impersonation was actually me. It still seems that this far in, it's kind of ambiguous as to who's Enforcer Matt and who's Enforcer. I'm the Enforcer. I'm the one who talks way too much and goes down too many rabbit holes. And Matthew is the one who does the question segment. And so... oh, wait a minute, Operator Starsky, Matthew, wait a minute, hang on, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to take a quick pause for a second, because Operator Starsky just said, bro, can you do Zelensky?
Ooh.
Oh, no, I can only do a small part. I think Starsky's asking this because I did it one time when we were all on a voice call together off stream, but, real quick, I can only do a short bit because Zelensky, and a Zelensky impression tears my voice up, like it's very hard to do, but... Vichne Slavia Lysim, Slava Ukraini. And I hope that was close. Hopefully that wasn't bad. But back to that question real quick, Matthew. Recap it for me just one more time.
Basically, he liked the car commercial impression.
Okay, so I thank you so much for enjoying it. Of course, that was me, Matthew. And that's one of the voices I can do fairly well is Sam Elliott. And I was thinking about maybe doing more videos like that just as a joke, short-ended videos. But I don't know. We'll have to see. But thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Ashley Richardson, who says, not Matt's B-Day fund, LOL. And yes, it is not Matt's B-Day. Very good of you to point that out. And I like that fun, too. Slava Ukraine, Kerch Bridge again, since Russia done it themselves first time round, question mark.
I don't think the Russians did it. I think the Ukrainians did it, and they're not claiming that they did it. So that way the Russians have I guess you could say, a way out where they're not having to directly say, "Oh my God, the Ukrainians plastered the bridge." But still, also Operator Starsky said nailed it. Thank you. I didn't. But anyways, moving back to that, I would have to say, by and large, the Ukrainians did it. The Russians are trying to make sure that they don't say that, because then that makes the Ukrainians look like they are well above the bat of what the Russians have said their abilities have been so far in this war. And also, the Ukrainians aren't saying anything because that allows the Russians to kind of get a way out where it doesn't really look like the Ukrainians did it with a weapon, like a missile or anything. But with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from the Otis, who says, since the Lend-Lease began on 10/1 and the Kerch Bridge was hit about a week later, do you think the ATACMS could have been what was used to hit it? God bless Ukraine.
We have thought about that, but ATACMS come in at a pretty high angle, and the bridge was hit from the side. From what we can tell by the explosion and where the epicenter of it looks like it was off the side of the bridge. So we don't think it was an ATACMS. We're thinking it was more so a missile that flew very low to the ground. There's a couple of them that do that. Actually, it's a really small number that do that. So that starts to narrow down the ideas of what we've been thinking it could have been. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that addresses the comment fairly well.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Junebug with the 72 on the end, who says, a moment of silence for all the fallen, maimed, orphaned, widowed, etc. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, and I would have to say that all of those poor people deserve to have vengeance done for them. And I'd have to say that hopefully the Ukrainian army can find the Russians that committed these crimes against them and hold them accountable for what they've done. We've seen too much of it. We keep on seeing it continuously going on day after day. Starsky's stream got cut short last night since he's here. He got cut short because the missiles were flying into Kyiv then. And it never stops. It's a reality that all Ukrainians have to live with, and it's something that should stop immediately. In fact, really, I still kind of stand by the idea that maybe the United States ought to threaten direct military intervention if a ceasefire isn't agreed upon immediately, and this is brought back into diplomatic negotiations. I think that's what we ought to do, but of course, I can't make that decision. I'm only a YouTuber. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from the strategist 777, who says, "Have been catching you guys on the treadmill every morning. Just wanted to say hello and keep up the good work."
Hey, well, thank you so much for the support. That's really cool to hear you're watching us on a treadmill. Also, fun fact, did you know that the treadmill was actually kind of a punishment device in British prisons in 1850? That's where it was invented.
You're kidding. Have you seen the jumbo shrimp on a treadmill, though?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, here, real quick. We'll pull up jumbo shrimp on a treadmill. I don't know if Starsky's seen it, but it's funny. Jumbo shrimp on a treadmill.
Now, this is next level.
This thing, this is nuts. So let me show you all this. Shrimp on a treadmill. Oh, I gotta mute that.
No. Sneak attack on the copyrighted music.
Yeah. But the shrimps can go. Like, look at that
crazy.
whole thing.
You put on a treadmill and it will go.
Oh, it looks like it's lagging behind a little bit. Oh. It's just scooting forward there. Oh, it's doing like galloping nearly. It's almost climbing out of the tank.
Yeah, it's not a fan of exercise, you can tell.
Yeah, it's just kind of keeping in here, but still.
Man, that thing kind of looks like a barracuda close up.
It kind of does. Man, and to think that all the shrimps we eat get exercised like this daily. I'm kidding, they don't. But still, it's pretty funny little video, speaking of shrimps on treadmills. Anyways, it's great to hear that you're watching us from a treadmill. And also, I thank you so much for the support and enjoying this channel, and also sending in some kind words as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Mr. Awesome Noob, who says, "Can we get a shout out to the Iowa Army ammunition plant, makers of such fine products as the 155mm artillery rounds and Javelin missiles?"
And thank you so much for the support, and I think they do deserve a shout out. The Iowa, what was the full name of that again? The Iowa Army Munitions Plant?
Iowa Army Ammunition Plant.
The Iowa Army Ammunition Plant. The Iowa Army Ammunition Plant.
Operator Starsky said, "The shrimp is an accurate representation of my platoon on a morning run."
That's actually a pretty good one. And also, moving on from that, thank you, Matthew, for getting that one. I was looking at that. I was like, interesting. Anyways, I would have to give them a massive shout out, because if these guys are the ones that are producing those accurate shells that are hitting Russians thousands of miles away in Ukraine, they deserve a whole round of applause for that. They're doing a great job, and I have to say, keep up the good work and keep the shells rolling. You can also see all of the train cars that are brought in to help keep this whole entire operation rolling. And oh my god, it's actually a lot of them. And there's also a lot of storehouses out here with railroads running right up to them. Really neat. Anyways, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And I hope that the guys at the Iowa Army Ammunition Plant, enjoyed the shout out. Let's look at the reviews real quick. Many more pictures and info should be available. Some of the rudest people I've encountered at a base. And worked here for 16 years. Ha! This place has great food and phenomenal service. 10 out of 10. I worked here, I think, in 1964. I've been back since 1990 when I had to close my business and head out for the first Gulf War. Let's see. Is this info any of us needs to know? Well, I think that if you're answering that one right there, I think if you're driving down Highway 34, considering it's 34th Infantry Division Highway, and there's probably a road sign that says that the Iowa Army Ammunition Plant is to the left off the next exit, I don't really think that it would matter if you kept this off of Google Maps or not. But still, we are on to the next one.
And I see a lot of folks saying in the live chat that the jumbo shrimp on a treadmill was actually a multi-million-dollar taxpayer-funded project.
It was.
And if it was, that's insane. That means somebody walked away with a lot of money for doing that goofy little experiment. What was the goal?
Imagine pitching this to the Department of Defense. Let's say, guys, that
in the future we use shrimp to plant bombs on submarines. We need to figure out how fast they can run. And then the Department of Defense, well, he's got a point, guys. Give him $3 million. And then he has a shrimp run on a treadmill for millions of dollars.
And then they went out and bought a Bugatti.
Yeah, and then they went out and built a stupid house out of book funds. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from KG, who says, was that a Jimmy Stewart impression? Enforcer did. Ha ha ha.
No, it was supposed to be the current president and an impression of him, but I can't do a lot of them well. A lot of people, I'm going to cut out not naming them real quick so that way I can get through this statement easily. A lot of people always want Obama impressions, but Obama's kind of a tough one to do for me. Also, George Bush is also a tough one as well. Trump was fairly easy because Trump has a very distinct voice, and almost anyone can do a Trump impression. But Biden, once again, the other three presidents out of these four have somewhat normal-ish voices, so it's really hard to fluctuate your normal talking into those kinds of voices, because it's not that extreme. Doing extremes is easy, but doing subtle changes is a lot more difficult, at least for me. So with that, I hope that addresses the comment, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Brad C., who says, Enforcer, I've seen the news. Russians are opening up their production lines for T-62s.
And I haven't seen that. Mark, the Orc Exsanguinator, now Orc, Mark Slava Ukraini, he did say that earlier, that they were opening up those factories again. I haven't been able to find official news on that, but considering that so many people are saying that now as a certainty, I'm assuming it's probably true, but I still have to go and make sure. So with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. Now, real quick, Operator Starsky has been on stream a lot, so he kind of gets like a free pass to get his comments booted up a little bit higher. But he said, imagine multiple running shrimps delivering deathly explosive devices into the enemy trenches. Go!
Like a whole army of those things running around.
Okay, sea roaches, go! And they just start running across the fields of Ukraine into the Russian trenches with like 1 ounce of explosives on them. Like, that would actually be funny. Someone said the shrimps blew up the bridge. Maybe they did. Maybe that was it. After all this time, the shrimps finally did it. And so with that, I hope we adjust that fairly well, Starsky. Pretty funny one. And we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Louis Marina, who says, science used to be the pursuit of truth. Now it is the pursuit of funding. A shrimp on a treadmill told me this.
Thank you for the support, Louis Marina. And I would have to say that sometimes science is a little bit of a rough category these days, because science further back in the day didn't really require massive amounts of funding, because the things they were doing were simpler, like figuring out like the Mendel effect and things like that, crossbreeding and figuring out that you can get certain traits to be further amplified through selective breeding. Those kinds of things were cheap and easily done. And all that stuff was pretty easy to do. You didn't require a massive amount of funding for it. But as the world has advanced forward and science has gotten a lot more advanced, it's become a lot more important and pertinent to get some kind of funding. And also, that starts to throw in a lot of questions to the efficacy of where this funding's come from. For example, a lot of private companies fund scientists to do certain kinds of experiments dependent on them finding a certain result from the outset. So it's not even really science in a way, it's more so just paying people to give you an answer and then saying, well, they're scientists, that's true. Just to say this, a lot of oil companies do that and with scientists, and it's really interesting to see that. There's a whole deal with private companies paying scientists to say certain things to promote their business. It's kind of like the 9 out of 10 dentists deal that you hear with every toothpaste. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from the BK Knight 3, who says, considering winter warfare, do you think Louisiana airboats would make good aerosanis, and do you think Starsky would like a ride?
I think, what was that thing again? Aerosanis?
Aerosanis, yes.
Aerosanis.
Like Dasani, like the water, but Aerosanis.
Oh! I guess Starsky would enjoy one. I don't know. I've never had one, so I can't really say for certain. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Envios Doritos, who says, "Drunk dude."
I'm probably a drunk dude that was in that video. There's no way that someone's logically reasoned in their mind that it would be a good idea to run over a visible landmine. But I don't know. Then again, they're Russians. But I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Anthony Bestwick, who says, "What effect will the new M30A1 have on the war? The M30A1, it has 182,000 preformed tungsten fragments for area effects. Also, look at Cardiff Castle."
Believe it or not, we've been to Cardiff Castle. It was an interesting one. They also have this really neat little room. If I can find this building. Where is it? You're kidding me. I can't find it. It's got to be here, right? Nope. Nope. It's got to be on the outskirts of town. No, it couldn't have been.
I think it was right in the middle.
Yeah, it was like right smack dab in the middle.
There it is. It says Cardiff Castle right there with that blue dot.
Oh yeah, it was literally just right down here. But Cardiff Castle was really cool. This was a castle built by William the Conqueror after he took over England. He started moving into South Wales, and this right here is one of the castles he built. Then they built this wall around it later on, post Crusades, because the towers around it. But this castle here, this side, I can show y'all some pictures of the interior. It's really cool. So there is the original keep that was made during William the Conqueror's time. Well, actually, I believe it was wooden then, but then they made it stone later. Anyways, going to the actual castle itself, or I guess what you could call the castle, this is it. Let me see if I can find y'all some interior pictures. It is beautiful on the inside, much like most British castles throughout the country. And one really cool thing about this one is that one of the guys who built this part, I believe it was in the 1800s, because this is kind of like a revival Gothic architectural style, he actually had like an Arabic room built into it. So you're just like in this normal English castle, and then you walk into this crazy looking like Ottoman room. It's really cool, if I can find it for y'all. But it's a beautiful castle. I have been here, and also an interesting fact about it is that you'll see these areas at the bottom of the wall, and they're a different color and a different kind of stone, I guess masonry, than the rest of it. And the reason being is that those are old Roman walls that existed in that exact same area when the Romans actually were in Cardiff about, I think, 1,500, 1,600 years before they built this part of the castle. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and it is a really cool castle to say the least. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Robert Whitehead, who says, "In the end, how do the men, women, combatants, or not of the DPR, LPR live in Ukraine after, or do they simply leave?"
Can you reread that one again?
He says, "In the end, how do the men, women, and combatants, or not, of the DPR, LPR live in Ukraine after, or do they simply leave?"
They would probably just live there. Like one thing that a lot of people don't think about is that when the Civil War ended, there was a lot of Confederate soldiers that just ended up living in the United States again, and they were fighting and dying against the Union Army, and now the Union Army was controlling the military districts that made up the South after the war for the next 10 to 15 years. So I think that not a lot would really happen to them. It would almost just be something where it's like, okay, that was the thing that happened, y'all all fought, we're just going to pretend like that didn't happen and treat y'all like normal citizens. That would most likely be how it goes, because there's really no other way to do it. So with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well with some historical precedents to give it an answer. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And next up, a big shout out to Devin Betterton for putting in a $5 super chat, but without a comment. And Devin, thank you very much for your support. We also have a $5 super chat from Gucci the Pug, who says, "Why is Venezia, Zitomir, and Sumy always targeted? What is the interest to Russia?"
Venezia and Zhytomyr are almost always targeted. Mostly because I guess you could say they're kind of like the roadways to the east of the country from the west. So they're targeted for that reason. Really, honestly, I can't tell you. Maybe it's just because they're peaceful areas of the country, and so the Russians decided to attack them for that reason. And Sumi's attacked because Sumi, I really can't explain why, but for some reason it holds significance to the Russians. I would have to try and look into why, but I've got to be honest with you, I can't really give you an answer as to why they target those cities directly, but I feel like Zhytomyr and Vinnytsia are most likely because they are gateways to the rest of the country. I believe both of them have major highways that run through them. And I'm correct, yeah. Zhytomyr is on the Zhytomyr highway from Zhytomyr to Kyiv, and also that goes all the way out to Rivne. And then the Vinnytsia is on the highway that goes all the way from Lviv to Kharkiv, and also down to Donetsk as well. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from GNGVR, who says, Leon Vier Pol Gorgogak. Here's how you pronounce that city in Wales. Give it a go. And I totally butchered it.
Sadly, I can't read it, but let's see how to
pronounce. Let me put it in the chat.
All right. We'll give it a shot once we see it in the live chat. One second, let me switch it from top chat to live chat. All right, so Lanvair Pogwing Gilgor Echwin Drob Ul Landicilio Gogorgor. Hopefully I pronounced that fairly decently. I feel like I didn't, considering that's probably fairly difficult even for the locals to say. But I actually heard something funny the other day, Matthew. I was hanging out with a friend on a Discord call, and they said the town of Mobile.
Mobile.
I'm going to go to Mobile. It's Mobile. And I don't mean that, but I'll put bucks on it.
Bucks?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that the entire time we've lived here.
Me either, but apparently it's just this little row of like 4 houses, and about 4 of them have burned down. And also they get this giant coal loading station right here. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for trying to help us to pronounce it fairly well.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Yuri M, who says, would you ever consider visiting Ukraine in the future? Thanks for doing the streams, and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I think I would try and visit Ukraine in the future at some point. I don't know when. These streams are very prohibitive in doing anything beyond them, so I don't know if it would be during these streams, maybe afterwards. But one thing I just noticed, everyone, is that did y'all notice that Bald and Bankrupt is back when he said he would be gone? He's already back. Speaking of, like, ending the whole thing, eventually. He's already back, and apparently he went to Afghanistan. So I guess he's no longer doing post-Soviet countries. He's just going to be doing, I don't even know, I guess Middle Eastern countries now? I don't really know. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Richard Daniel Jr., who says, Enforcer, please use your imagination and do a voice of what Mr. Lunchtime might say and sound like, please.
Let me try and get some cholesterol in my voice real quick to get this to work. I can't.
What was that?
I'm so fat.
That's actually
Is that you, Arnold?
I'm the governor of California. Now I'm a movie actor. I take testosterone and stick in adrenaline. I lift weights. I eat protein.
But I honestly, I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with that one. I would like to use my imagination, but my imagination is taking me to places that my vocal cords cannot go. And so I thank you so much for the support. I hope you enjoyed the Arnold Schwarzenegger impression in Replacement. But with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from Trolls Donder, who says, for your coffee and donut fund, Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support to the Coffee and Donut Fund, and also Slava Ukraini. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Dupper Bob, Dubsy Dabster, and Robin M for each putting in a $2 donation, but without a comment. But as always, we do appreciate the support very much, and thank you to all 3 of you for keeping the channel running. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Louis Marina, once again, who says, definitely not sidetracking you with beautiful historic buildings, but Arundel Castle, been there many times and is more impressive in real life.
Let me check this real quick. I think I know the one you're talking about. Oh, yeah. I know. Let me check. Yeah. This is the one. I have not been to this castle. I'll actually bring y'all to another castle that's cool. This one, actually, I was showing to my mom the other day, and I said, this one looks a lot like Windsor, doesn't it? Because look at it. Like hear me out on this one, Matthew. You'll see it once I show it to you. It's got the rear buildings over here. It's got the central keep. The walls connect to that central keep, and then there's like this larger courtyard over here. And also, this is beautiful. I'll show y'all some pictures of it. Here's one part of it.
Well, that's pretty nice.
Yeah, here's it from a distance. It's a beautiful castle. It's really a good one. They also got some impressive gardens in it. All around, a really impressive place. I love British castles. I think there's
folks, we actually have some pretty decent stuff over here in America as well. Look at Biltmore. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, come on, man.
That was like a halfway joke.
Yeah, here's I believe one of the great halls. Well, I guess you could call this probably a portrait gallery. I love the roofs. I love the Gothic roofs. They're beautiful. But yes, beautiful castle all the way through. I love this kind of architecture. Like this room, oh, perfect. Like if I could have a house that had a room like this, I probably would be out like fox hunting with friends or something at that point, but like still, it's so beautiful. I just love the architecture and the style of these kinds of buildings. Also, most of this here was probably built in the 1800s because that's about the time that this stuff started to happen and it was kind of in vogue. But anyways, remember the outline, the layout of this castle, Matthew, with how all of these buildings back here, you have the keep, you have the wall, and how it's shaped. We're about to go to Windsor, and Windsor is just like that on a larger scale. Okay, see, you've got all of the buildings back here on this side. You have the keep, which is connected by the walls that extend for both sides. I believe they tore down this one and then moved it around over here, but still almost the same thing, almost the same shape.
I gotta say, I like Windsor a lot better.
I love Windsor. Windsor is beautiful. We've been to Windsor as well. We took a tour of this one. And wow, it's incredible. Believe it or not, the Queen was actually here while we were here. We actually saw the Royal Sovereign flying over the keep, which they fly that wherever the Queen may go. And I also did see the Queen in real life. She was riding in that Daimler car, that claret-colored Daimler car that she always rode around in. And she pulled out of Buckingham. They lowered the Royal Sovereign. She drove not drove. She was riding in the back of the car, and we were about 6 feet away from her. And that was really cool because not a lot of British people got to see the Queen in person, and especially now that she's passed, no one will ever see her again. So kind of a really interesting story of our trip to Britain. Also, Matthew didn't get to see him because they were in the car. We took the train. So with that, we are on to the next one. And I thank you so much once again for the support, and also no problem at all being distracted. It's beautiful stuff. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and also, it looks like that question that we didn't answer earlier because we forgot about it. It looks like it was from Anthony Bestwick. He said, what will the effect of the new M30A1 for the HIMARS be? It has 182,000 preformed tungsten fragments for area effects on the battlefield.
I believe the effect of that will most likely be anti-infantry. I don't really see it being used against many armored vehicles all too well. I did see it today, though, in its defense, puncturing the armor of BTRs, but I do not think it will have enough penetrating power and damaging power to really do anything meaningful to main battle tanks. Maybe they could perforate the barrels of the cannons, but beyond that, I don't think they'll be able to do much. So I think it'll be anti-infantry, and then the unitary heads will most likely be used to attack the supply lines, communication lines, and logistics as usual. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well this time. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Man of Culture, who says, The Enforcer, music, I sleep, wind, bass boosted.
What?
I think he was talking about that video with all the trucks and the supplies and how bad the wind was. He's talking about the wind was bass boosted.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was bass boosted in that video. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from GNF, who says, talk about Crimean War. And man, is that broad.
Talk about Crimean War. So in short, the Turks were getting blasted by the Russians. At that point, Russia did control Ukraine. It was part of the Russian Empire. And the Turks and the Russians were fighting over this little area here. I forgot the exact name of this little delta. I believe it's the Danube Delta. Let me check. Yep, it's the Danube Delta, I believe. They were fighting over this area. The Turks were getting beat. The Russians and the French got scared that that would throw off the balance of power in Europe, so they went to war. They appointed 2 incompetent commanders, 1 incompetent British one, 1 incompetent French one, and they went up against the best and the brightest Russian commanders there were in Crimea. The British and the French landed north of Sevastopol, marched down to Sevastopol, obliterated the Russians. It was a bit of a bloody battle, but they still took the city. They held it, and then over the next 2 years, hundreds of thousands would die. Somehow, the British and the French, even with incredibly incompetent commanders in every regard, would win against Russia's best and brightest generals, which tells you that even back then, they just weren't up to par. And so I hope that's a quick summary of the Crimean War. Maybe that would be something for a video in the future. But with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one. Thank you so much for the support.
All right, and that was our last super chat. So we're now moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have Mark Hodges, who have figured out the Morse code. And he says, Ukraine will never be deterred by a few missiles. Slava Ukraine.
And also, that is correct. That is the Morse code message of the night. And I don't think the Ukrainians will ever be deterred, no matter what is thrown at them from the Russians. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Dr. J, who says, have you noticed the X-ray of supposedly Kerch Bridge truck bomb has one-wheel drive on the truck when the picture of the actual truck has 2 drive wheels? What a super bad fake.
And also, that is a pretty good point. And I would have to say, that would be a pretty bad fake, considering that little fact. And so with that, I thank you so much for letting us know that, and also pointing that out, because I think that's something that should be noted. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a question from Jungle, who says, is the Novakova Dam access channel filled in to make an earthen bridge?
Can you reread that?
He says, is the Novakova Dam access channel filled in to make an earthen bridge?
I wouldn't know. I haven't heard anything about that, and I haven't seen satellite pictures of it. But this lock area could have been filled in, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Joe Blow, who says, Belarus has 800 plus tanks. How many in storage? Not active, question mark.
Probably a majority of those tanks are in storage and not active, considering that their army is only around 60,000 large, and only about 5,000 of them are deployed to the border. It's probably not a massive amount that are actually in operation. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Melissa Harden, who says, did you hear that Putin says that Europe can have gas from Nord Stream 2 just by turning the tap? Has he become that desperate?
I have not heard that, and I wouldn't doubt it if he did, because now that the Nord Streams have been knocked out for a bit, the Russian government is probably hungry for money. As they say in the Rocky movies, which I've only seen a little bit, he's hungry, Rocky, he's hungry. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we're on to the next one. And that was a terrible impersonation of that coach that Rocky Balboa had in that movie. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
I thought you were about to talk about that guy from Ratatouille that said hungry for more.
Oh yeah, that what was his name?
Anton Ego.
Yeah, Anton Ego. The food was delightful, and I will return hungry for more. But with that, we're on to the next.
And up next, we have a question once again from Justin Norse, who says, Enforcer, are there things that we can do to ratchet up the pressure on Russia without necessarily escalating through a direct attack on Russian forces in Ukraine?
Yes, we could escalate the pressure on the Russian forces by, I'm trying to think about some of the options that there could be. We could start to scale up forces in the Baltics. That would start to divert a decent amount of Russia's attention up here, and once Finland becomes a member, we could start building up forces up here, which would just send a whole bunch of them into directions that they don't need to be going in. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well. That's a really quick fix to it. There's a whole bunch of creative things that you could come up with, but I feel like that would just be the quickest one, like, hey, look over here, and they'd start moving up there, thinking that something was about to happen. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. We are on to the next one.
And before we move on to our next live chat question, big shout out to Dubsy Dabster for putting in a $2 donation once again. And we do appreciate the support very much, Dubsy, and thank you for once again supporting the channel. Up next from our live chat, we have a question from Everett McGee, who says maybe Russia is taking all of Belarus's military equipment so they can then annex it without any possibility of resistance.
Perhaps that may be what they're doing, but at the same time, it would be a massive administrative cost for the Russians to try and also administer Belarus as well. And so it actually is a lot more economically beneficial to pretty much have these countries as vassals to the home nation, where they maintain their own, I guess you could say, police force, their own small military, and keep things in check without too much dissent going on. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up we have another question from Justin Norse, who says, Enforcer, what lessons do you think China's leadership are drawing from the invasion of Ukraine? Does it diminish their willingness to retake Taiwan by force?
I believe it definitely has, considering that the Chinese were pretty apt at the beginning. It seemed like these two things were going to happen at the exact same time. But once the Russians started to collapse in Ukraine, the Chinese kind of backed off. Then they tried to reassert themselves about 2 months ago, and then they've backed off almost completely again. So in that regard, I think that it has largely dissuaded them from doing anything with Taiwan. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up we have a question from Kellen Hansen, who says, Enforcer, what is your prediction on the next big news coming out of Russia or Ukraine? Example, sinking of the Moskva, Kerch Bridge explosion, etc.
Can you reread that one again real quick?
What is your prediction on the next big news coming out of Russia or Ukraine?
I believe that the next big news coming out of Russia or Ukraine will be, trying to think, the nuclear power plant again. It seems that that's always a go-to for the Russians to try and freak everyone out with. So I think that that'll probably be the next big news, is that more rounds are slamming around near the power plant, and that's maybe in jeopardy. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we're going to answer 3 more from the live chat, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, real quick though, I'm actually going to read off one of them. This isn't really Ukraine related, but I found this one interesting. Din Jarin says, I despise royalty, or do you like being ruled by unelected elites who rule for a lifetime and are exempt from paying taxes and actually take in taxes from the public and call you a commoner and peasant? I don't think the royal family has called anyone a commoner or a peasant in recent times, but one thing that is actually interesting and a bit of a misnomer to most people is that the royal family is actually more of a tax benefit to the British public than they are a tax drain. The royal family, per citizen, adds about £2.30 to the national treasury every year through the profits made on royal property. In case of y'all don't know, the royal family actually gets a salary from Parliament, something like 60 to 70 million pounds per year, in exchange for all of the income that is made off of royal properties, which it equals, as far as we know, somewhere around 250 to 275 million pounds per year. And so Parliament makes a lot more money off of the royal family than the royal family makes off of the country. In fact, the British government largely profits off of the royalty's existence. On top of that, imagine the tourism money that comes out of Britain as compared to France that no longer has a monarchy. No one goes to France to see anything rarer than Versailles, but everyone goes to Britain because it's pixie dusted with all kinds of neat little royal things, little royal symbols, Her Majesty or His Majesty's now mail service and all kinds of other things. It just adds an extra little bit of pizzazz to Britain that draws in tourism, which is an undefined amount of money that is brought in from that reason alone. I don't really find, to be honest, the royal family, specifically in Britain, to be a bad thing. They do a massive amount of service for the public. They run incredible charities. help out loads of people. And I think that by and large in Britain, with the role that they play in Britain's modern society, they are a great force of good and unity for the nation. Because while British parliamentary politics can always get very heated and divisive at times, everyone in the country can always look towards the monarch as a symbol of stability and unity in the nation instead of a divisive character. So I find them to be quite nice, really. In that specific instance, I do like America's federal republic system, though. But with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this question goes to Barb, who says, when Russian artillery pieces like the Mista S are closer and one gets bombed, do the Russians on the other piece drop everything and scurry away?
They largely do. Whenever the Ukrainians start dropping artillery barrages on the Russians, they go running for the hills. We've seen it so many times. It's just, it's a fact of life. You hit a Russian unit, they're gone immediately. So with that, I hope that does address the comment, because if a Ukrainian artillery shell lands anywhere near them, they're on the 10K marathon. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that person is David Simonetti, who says, did you hear about the D1 152mm howitzer in use by Russian DNR and LNR forces? They are from 1943.
I did know about them, and they have been in use a lot. I believe we've actually seen a couple of those artillery pieces in use by the Ukrainians as well, but not in the numbers that they have been in the Russian artillery forces. The Russians use those as their staple artillery piece. And so in that regard, I have heard about them. We have covered that they're vintage at this point. And also, they don't have incredibly far range either. They're very short range artillery pieces for the caliber that they fire. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for the support. I hope you all have enjoyed tonight's stream. And if you did, please make sure to hit the like button, because it helps this channel to keep on running, and it helps us to, and our news to reach more people from all around YouTube, so that way they can keep apprised of the situation in the war in Ukraine, and hopefully our fundraisers can become even better and even grander with each new member of the Lee Spring Army. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to report the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again. Have a great night, and take care.
No!